My husband canceled our 10th anniversary dinner for urgent work. Then I sold his $180,000 vintage Porsche to fund my dream business. 6 months later, my company acquired his biggest client, and he still doesn't know I'm the CEO. Rain check on tonight, babe? This Tokyo deal won't close itself. The text message glowed on my phone screen, the 5th anniversary Michael had missed in our 12 years together. I stared at his message, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I sat alone in our dining room, surrounded by unlit candles, unopened, champagne, and the remnants of a hand-prepared anniversary dinner that had taken me 8 hours to cook. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I took a slow sip of my untouched champagne, my gaze drifting to the garage through our bay windows, where his beloved 1973 Porsche 911 Carrera RS sat gleaming under the automatic lights. That car, his retirement fund, his legacy, his baby, the one thing he never canceled plans for. Behind me on the wall hung our wedding photo, both of us beaming with promise. If you'd told me then that a decade later I'd be sitting alone, on our anniversary while Michael closed one more deal, I wouldn't have believed you. Yet here I was, another evening sacrificed to Pearson Dynamics, the company that had slowly consumed my husband and our marriage. I picked up my phone again, reading Michael's message one more time. The Tokyo deal. Always another deal. Another client, another reason our life together took a back seat. I slipped off my heels, the new ones I'd bought specially for tonight, and walked barefoot to the kitchen to pack away the untouched food the roast beef would keep. My patience wouldn't. As I mechanically wrapped each dish in plastic, my mind drifted to the conversation I'd had with Olivia earlier that day. My best friend since college, she'd recently launched her own marketing agency after years of being overlooked at Hartford Media. "You should see the clients coming in, Ginny," she'd said over coffee that morning, her eyes bright with excitement. "All those ideas that got shot down by the old boys club? Turns out actual businesses want them. Turns out I wasn't the problem." I'd smiled, genuinely happy for her success, even as my own professional dreams remained locked in the box Michael had helped me pack them into when we married. "Michael says there's no point in both of us working 80-hour weeks," I'd explained when she'd asked why I hadn't pursued my MBA after our wedding. "One high-powered career per household is enough." What I didn't tell Olivia, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd secretly completed my degree online last year, paying for it from the money I'd squirreled away from my personal shopping allowance. Michael would have called it excessive, a needless expense for someone whose job it was to manage our home and social calendar. The kitchen clean, I wandered back to the dining room, my fingers trailing along the carved mahogany table that had been delivered from Milan just last month. Another extravagant purchase Michael had made without consulting me. "You'll love it, babe. Perfect for when we host the board members next quarter." The house was filled with such trophies, expensive evidence of Michael's success. The Warhol in the foyer, the hand-knotted Persian rugs, the wine cellar stocked with bottles worth more than what most people made in a month. And of course, the fur. Crown jewel. The vintage Porsche that had its own climate-controlled section of our 3-car garage. My phone buzzed again. I expected another text from Michael, perhaps an expanded explanation or even an apology, but instead saw Olivia's name on the screen. "How's the anniversary dinner going? Did he like the cufflinks?" The diamond-studded cufflinks I'd almost forgotten. They sat in their velvet box next to Michael's place setting, a gift he might not see for days depending on how long this urgent deal kept him at the office. I picked up the box and snapped it shut. He canceled. "Tokyo deal," I texted back, the 3 words containing more resignation than anger at this point. Olivia's response was immediate. "Again? Gin, that's the 3rd year in a row." "5th, actually," I corrected, though I wasn't sure why I bothered keeping count anymore. Come over. I've got contracts to review, but I also have wine and takeout. I glanced at my reflection in the dining room mirror, the elegant black dress I'd bought for tonight, the carefully applied makeup, the pearl earrings Michael had given. Me on our first anniversary when canceled dinners were still followed by heartfelt apologies and makeup dates. Thanks, but I think I'll just go to bed. Long day. Another lie. My days weren't long anymore. They were empty. I'd given up my budding career in financial analysis when we married because Michael convinced me that his fast-track career needed a solid home base. Someone to manage the household, plan the corporate gatherings, be the perfect corporate wife. I'd been good at it, too. Michael's boss had once joked that half of Michael's success came from my networking skills. Your wife could sell sand in the desert, he'd said at last year's company gala, raising his glass in my direction. Michael had laughed. Good thing she's content managing our social calendar instead, or I'd be out of a job. Content. Was I? Had I ever been? I picked up the bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon, Michael's favorite, and carried it to the kitchen. As I placed it back in the wine fridge, my gaze fell on the keys hanging on the custom key rack by the door to the garage. 3 sets. My practical Audi, Michael's everyday BMW, and the specialized key to the Porsche Carrera that Michael only drove on perfect weather weekends. The car that had its own insurance policy with my name listed as an authorized driver, just in case of emergency, Michael had said when signing the paperwork. Just in case. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I took the Porsche key from its hook, feeling its weight in my palm. Michael had spent 5 years hunting down that car, paying a premium to get one with matching numbers and original paint. Better than any investment portfolio, he'd told me as he'd signed the check for $180,000. This model appreciates 15% year over year. I carried the key back to the dining room, setting it next to the cufflinks. The juxtaposition struck me as almost poetic. The gift I'd bought him that he'd never see, and the key to the most precious thing he owned. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. Out of habit, the habit of a woman whose life had been reduced to managing her husband's social calendar, I checked it immediately. It wasn't from Michael. It was from the MBA program I'd completed, advertising their alumni entrepreneurship competition. Turn your business idea into reality with $50,000 in seed funding. Application deadline. Tomorrow. I'd forgotten about the competition. Months ago, before completing my final course, I'd drafted an application detailing my concept for a boutique financial advisory firm focused on helping women-owned businesses secure funding. I'd called it Phoenix Capital, a name inspired by rising from the ashes of abandoned ambition. I'd never submitted it. What was the point? Michael would never support me starting a business. One high-powered career per household is enough, he'd say again. And without his support, both emotional and financial, how could I possibly get it off the ground? I opened the draft application on my laptop, rereading my business plan with fresh eyes. It was good, better than good. It showcased everything I'd learned in my secret MBA program, combined with the insights I'd gained from years of listening to Michael discuss deals, watching how the financial world operated from the periphery. My gaze shifted from the laptop, screen to the Porsche key gleaming under the chandelier light. $180,000. 5 years of appreciation. Better than any investment portfolio? What had Olivia said this morning? Turns out I wasn't the problem. I picked up my phone and called her. I've changed my mind about coming over, I said when she answered. But I need a favor first. Does your brother still work at Classic Auto Brokers? Troy? Yeah, he's the sales manager now. Why? I looked at the Porsche key in my hand, turning it over as an unfamiliar feeling of resolution settled in my chest. I need to sell a car. Quickly and discreetly. Michael's Porsche? Olivia's voice was a mix of shock and something else. Excitement, perhaps. Gin, are you sure? He loves that car more than he loves spending our anniversary together, I finished for her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. More than he respects my time. More than he values my dreams. There was a pause on the line. When Olivia spoke again, her voice was steady. I'll call Troy now. He can meet you tonight if you want. Perfect. And Olivia? I'll need your help with something else too. Remember that entrepreneurship competition I told you about? The deadline is tomorrow. As I hung up, I caught my reflection again in the dining room mirror. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman staring back at me. She wasn't just a corporate wife or a social secretary. She was Ginny Reynolds, MBA, financial analyst, future CEO. I gathered the key, my laptop, and the untouched bottle of champagne. Tonight we would celebrate after all, not an anniversary, but a beginning. As I backed the Porsche out of the garage 40 minutes later, the engine purring with a power I'd forgotten cars could possess, I glimpsed our house in the rearview mirror. The perfect home for the perfect corporate wife. By the time Michael returned from his urgent Tokyo deal, everything would be different. At Classic Auto Brokers, Troy was waiting, his eyes widening as I pulled up in the Porsche. Olivia said, "You wanted to sell it, but does Michael know?" he asked as he circled the car admiringly. "I'm an authorized driver and co-owner," I replied, handing him the paperwork from the glove box. "And I need this done tonight. Full market value, cash offer, no haggling." Troy whistled as he reviewed the documentation. "This is a collector's dream, Ginny. I can get you $215,000 by morning from a buyer I know in Greenwich. He's been looking for exactly this model, this color, this condition. But are you absolutely sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I interrupted, handing him the key. "And Troy? I'd appreciate your discretion. Not even Olivia needs to know the final sale price." He nodded, understanding. Of course. Business is business. Business is business. How many times had Michael used those exact words to justify missed dinners, canceled vacations, forgotten anniversaries? As I called a rideshare to take me to Olivia's downtown apartment, I felt lighter than I had in years. By this time tomorrow, Phoenix Capital would have its seed funding, and considerably more than the $50,000 the entrepreneurship competition offered. Michael's baby would finance mine, and he wouldn't know until it was far too late to stop it. Olivia's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a successful agency founder. An industrial loft in the arts district with exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that perfectly balanced comfort with style. When I arrived, she was waiting with an open bottle of red wine and a concerned expression. "You actually did it? You sold the Porsche?" She handed me a glass as I collapsed onto her oversized sectional, kicking off my heels for the second time. "That evening? Technically, Troy is selling it. The money transfers tomorrow morning." I took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor wash away any last doubts. Michael always said it was a better investment than stocks. Time to test that theory. Olivia perched on the arm of the sofa, studying me with a mixture of awe and worry. "He's going to lose his mind, Gin. That car is his prized possession. And I was supposed to be his partner." The words came out sharper than I intended. 12 years, Liv. 12 years of being nothing more than a footnote in the Michael Reynolds success story. "What changed?" she asked quietly. "You've been unhappy before, but this is different." I stared into my wine glass, watching the liquid catch the light from Olivia's artful pendant lamps. What had changed? Everything. Nothing. Maybe I'd finally reached my breaking point after years of slow erosion. "The MBA," I said finally. Finishing it made me realize I've been living someone else's version of my life. Michael's version. I set down my glass and pulled out my laptop. Now I need your help with this application. The deadline's tomorrow. For the next 3 hours, Olivia and I refined my business plan for Phoenix Capital. Her marketing expertise helped sharpen my pitch, highlighting the unique value proposition. A financial advisory firm specifically designed to help women entrepreneurs secure funding and scale their businesses. "This is brilliant, Ginny," Olivia said, reading through our final draft. "You've identified a genuine gap in the market. Women-owned businesses receive less than 3% of venture capital funding, but they consistently outperform male-owned companies in ROI." I know. I've been researching this for years. I closed my laptop, suddenly exhausted but exhilarated. Ever since Michael talked me out of finishing my MBA the first time around, I kept thinking about all those women like you, brilliant, capable, driven, who just need someone to take them seriously. "Someone who's been there," Olivia added. "Someone who understands what it's like to be underestimated." I nodded, the truth of her words settling deep in my chest. That was exactly what Phoenix Capital would offer, not just financial advice, but understanding born from personal experience. My phone buzzed with a text from Troy. "Buyer confirmed. Paperwork ready. Funds will clear by 9 a.m. No going back now. You can stay here tonight," Olivia offered, noticing my expression. "The guest room is all yours." I accepted gratefully, suddenly unable to face the empty mansion that had never felt like mine despite my name on the deed. As Olivia showed me to her spare bedroom, my phone buzzed again. Michael, finally remembering the significance of the eye. "Date. Sorry about dinner, babe. Tokyo team had last-minute concerns. Make it up to you this weekend? No mention of our anniversary. No acknowledgement of the special dinner I'd prepared. Just another rain check that would inevitably be canceled." For another urgent matter, I didn't reply. Morning came with a symphony of notifications. First, a confirmation from Troy that the sale was complete, $215,000 transferred to my private account. Then, an acknowledgement from the MBA program that my application had been received. Finally, a message from Crystal Watson, an old colleague from my financial analyst days who now worked at Meridian Financial, one of the firms Michael's company frequently partnered with. "Drinks soon? Need to pick your brain about something," I smiled, typing back an immediate yes. Crystal had been reaching out periodically since I'd left the workforce, usually when she needed insider perspective on how firms like Pearson Dynamics operated. I'd always been happy to help, maintaining my network even as Michael dismissed these connections as just social. Little did he know that these social connections had kept me engaged with the financial world all these years, providing insights that had helped shape Phoenix Capital's business model. I showered and borrowed clothes from Olivia, a sleek blazer and pencil skirt that felt like armor after years of designer dresses chosen to complement Michael's image. Today marked the beginning of reclaiming my identity, starting with how I presented myself to the world. "What's your next move?" Olivia asked over coffee, watching me transform from corporate wife to businesswoman with each deliberate choice. Hair pulled back severely, minimal jewelry, understated makeup. First, I open a business account for Phoenix Capital. Then I meet with Crystal to nurture that connection. After that, I find an office space. I stirred my coffee methodically. Michael won't be back from Tokyo until Friday. That gives me 3 days to establish enough momentum that he can't easily stop me. And when he discovers the Porsche is gone, I took a careful sip from my mug. By then, there will be nothing he can do about it. The money will be invested in the business, contracts will be signed, and Phoenix Capital will be more than just an idea. Olivia nodded slowly. "You've really thought this through." "I've had years to think it through, Liv. Years of sitting at dinner parties listening to Michael and his colleagues discuss strategies and investments. Years of reading every business publication, staying current on market trends, completing my MBA in secret." I set down my cup with finality. all while being treated like an ornament. Pretty to look at, but fundamentally decorative. As I gathered my things to leave, Olivia hugged me tightly. He's going to fight back, you know. Men like Michael always do when their control is threatened. I'm counting on it, I replied, surprising myself with my calm certainty. But this time, I'll be fighting from a position of strength. My first stop was Valencia Bank, where I opened a business account for Phoenix Capital, using my MBA diploma and the business plan as supporting documentation. The banker, a woman named Gracie Thompson, reviewed my materials with growing interest. This is impressive, Mrs. Reynolds. Your focus on women-led businesses fills a significant market need, she typed efficiently, setting up the account. Will Mr. Reynolds be a co-signer on the account? No, I said firmly. This is my independent venture. If Gracie found this unusual, she didn't show it. Instead, she nodded professionally and continued, processing the paperwork. And will you be making an initial deposit today? Yes, $200,000. I provided the account details for the transfer, watching Gracie's carefully neutral expression slip momentarily to reveal surprise. Not many new businesses started with that kind of capital. That's substantial, she commented, recovering quickly. May I ask the source of these funds? Investment liquidation, I replied smoothly. Technically true, the Porsche had been an investment, according to Michael. As I left the bank with Phoenix Capital's new account information, I felt a strange lightness. For years, I'd accessed only the household accounts Michael had set up for me. Accounts he monitored, questioning any expenditure he deemed unnecessary. Now I controlled significant capital that he knew nothing about. My phone rang as I was getting into my Audi. Michael. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message as I drove to meet Crystal. Hey babe, wrapping up in Tokyo. Bringing you something special to make up for missing our dinner. Love you. No mention of our anniversary, even now. Just our dinner, as if it had been any ordinary evening. And a gift, another expensive trinket to join the collection of consolation prizes that filled my jewelry box. Earrings for the vacation canceled due to an IPO. A bracelet for the Christmas spent on conference calls. A necklace for the birthday dinner interrupted by urgent emails. I deleted the message without saving it. Crystal was waiting at Eloise's, an upscale cafe frequented by the financial district crowd. She stood to greet me, her sharp gray suit and confident posture reminding me of the life I'd set aside for. Michael's convenience. Ginny, you look different. She studied me appreciatively. Good different. Powerful. I feel different, I admitted, sliding into the booth across from her. I'm making some changes. Changes? Crystal raised an eyebrow. Intrigued. Do tell. I'm starting a business. Financial advisory for women entrepreneurs. The words felt exhilarating to say aloud, making the reality of Phoenix Capital more concrete with each telling. Actually, that's partly why I was so eager to meet. I'd love your insights on the current funding landscape. Crystal's expression shifted from friendly curiosity to professional interest. Fascinating timing. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you. She leaned forward, lowering her voice slightly. Meridian is launching a Women in Business initiative next quarter. We're allocating significant resources to finance female-led ventures, but we need advisors who understand both sides of the equation. My heart raced as I realized the opportunity presenting itself. Meridian Financial was one of the largest investment firms in the city and a frequent collaborator with Pearson Dynamics, Michael's company. Advisors like me, I said, connecting the dots. Exactly like you. Crystal nodded approvingly. You understand the corporate world from both sides. You've got the financial background from your analyst days, plus years of observing how deals get made from your position as Michael's wife, I finished, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. Crystal regarded me thoughtfully. I was going to say, from your unique vantage point, but yes, being married to Michael Reynolds has given you insight few others have. Everyone knows you're the real reason his client relationships are so solid. You remember details about people that he misses. You make connections he'd overlook. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old loyalty, the instinct to downplay my contributions and highlight Michael's. Then I remembered sitting alone at our anniversary dinner while he prioritized yet another deal over our marriage. When does this initiative launch? I asked instead. Next quarter officially, but we're laying the groundwork now. I'd love to bring you in as a consultant initially, with potential for a more formal partnership once Phoenix Capital is established. By the time our coffee meeting ended, Crystal and I had outlined a collaboration that would give Phoenix Capital immediate credibility and access to Meridian's extensive resources. It wasn't just a lucky break. It was the culmination of years maintaining professional relationships, even as Michael dismissed them as mere socializing. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Congratulations! Your application for the entrepreneurship competition has advanced to the final round. Presentation scheduled for next week. Everything was falling into place with a speed that would have seemed miraculous if I hadn't spent years preparing for this moment. The universe wasn't handing me opportunities. I was finally positioned to seize them. My phone didn't stop buzzing for the rest of the day. There were follow-up emails from Crystal about the Meridian partnership, messages from Olivia suggesting office spaces in her building, and a confirmation from Troy that all paperwork for the Porsche had been filed. What was noticeably absent was any real concern from Michael about where I'd spent the night. His only message read, "Where are you? Hope you're not still upset about dinner. Landing at 8 p.m. Friday. XO." I didn't respond. Let him wonder for once. Instead, I channeled my energy into securing a small but elegant office 3 floors below Olivia's agency in the Arts District. The building manager, impressed by my immediate payment of first and last month's rent, plus security deposit, promised to expedite the paperwork and have the space ready by tomorrow. Fully furnished? He confirmed, scanning the lease agreement. Yes, but minimal. Modern, clean lines. Nothing fussy. I was conscious of every decision reflecting Phoenix Capital's brand identity. No more decorative touches chosen to please someone else's aesthetic. By late afternoon, I had ordered business cards, secured a domain name, and contracted Olivia's agency to fast-track a website and brand package. My friend had insisted on giving me the founder's discount, though I suspected she was doing much of the work herself as a personal favor. "You'll be my biggest success story," she'd said when I tried to insist on paying full price. "Just think of all the referrals I'll get when Phoenix Capital becomes the go-to financial advisor for women entrepreneurs." Her confidence in my vision was intoxicating after years of having my ambitions subtly dismissed. I found myself working with an intensity and focus I hadn't experienced since my early career, before Michael had convinced me that one high-powered professional per household was enough. I was in the middle of drafting my presentation for the entrepreneurship competition when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ginny Reynolds speaking," I answered, the formal greeting feeling both foreign and right on my tongue. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Jacob Harris from the Lancaster Group." The name triggered immediate recognition. Lancaster was one of Michael's firm's biggest competitors. Crystal Watson suggested I reach out. "I understand you're launching a financial advisory specifically for women-led businesses?" My pulse quickened. "That's correct, Mr. Harris. Phoenix Capital aims to address the significant funding gap faced by female entrepreneurs." Fascinating. Lancaster has been looking to diversify our investment portfolio in exactly this direction. Perhaps we could meet to discuss potential synergies? By the time I hung up, I had a meeting scheduled with Lancaster's executive team for the following afternoon. Crystal had clearly been busy making introductions, positioning Phoenix Capital within the industry even before we officially launched. As I drove back to Olivia's apartment, I still couldn't bring myself to return to the empty house. I pondered the irony. For years, Michael had protected me from the business world, claiming it was cutthroat and unforgiving. Yet here I was, one day into my venture, already forming alliances with major players who seemed to value precisely what Michael had dismissed: my insight, my experience, my perspective. Olivia was working late, so I had her apartment to myself. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Somewhere across town, our house, Michael's showcase, sat dark and empty. The garage space where the Porsche had gleamed, now vacant, tangible evidence of my rebellion. He would notice the car's absence the moment he returned from Tokyo. Would he call the police? Report it stolen? The thought made me laugh out loud, the sound echoing strangely in the empty loft. How would he explain that his wife was an authorized driver? That she had every legal right to sell the vehicle? My amusement faded as I considered the confrontation that inevitably awaited me. Michael was not a man accustomed to being challenged, especially not by his supportive wife. When he discovered what I'd done, his reaction would be explosive. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I prepared for the fallout? For potentially losing everything we'd built together? The comfortable lifestyle, the social standing, the security? Took a deliberate sip of wine, steadying myself. What had I really lost? A marriage where I was valued primarily for how well I arranged dinner parties? A home that showcased Michael's success rather than our partnership? A life where my dreams were perpetually deferred in service of his? No, I wasn't losing anything that truly mattered. I was reclaiming what should have been mine all along: my ambition, my purpose, my independence. My phone buzzed with a text from Troy. "Buyer loves the car, wants to know if you have the maintenance records." I smiled, responding, "In the filing. Cabinet at home. I'll scan them tomorrow." The filing cabinet. Another example of how thoroughly I'd managed Michael's life while he barely noticed mine. Every document related to our life together, from appliance warranties to car maintenance records, meticulously organized by his just-a-housewife partner. I wondered how long it would take him to realize how much of his efficient life had been engineered by me. The following morning brought an email that made my heart race. "Congratulations. Phoenix Capital has been selected as a Phoenix Fund recipient. Initial investment of $50,000 confirmed." The entrepreneurship competition. I'd advanced directly to funding without even needing to make my presentation. The attached note explained that the selection committee had been so impressed by my business plan that they'd fast-tracked the decision. I forwarded the email to Olivia, adding, "It's happening." Her response was immediate. "Told you! Celebratory dinner tonight. No cancellations." Permitted. With renewed confidence, I spent the morning at the new office space, directing the minimal furnishings: a sleek desk, ergonomic chair, small conference table with 4 chairs, and a stylish but understated seating area for client meetings. By noon, Phoenix Capital had a physical presence, modest but legitimate. I'd just finished arranging my new business cards in their holder when the building receptionist called up. "Mrs. Reynolds, there's a Ms. Watson here to see you." Crystal arrived moments later, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed executive authority. She surveyed the office with an approving eye. "You work fast, Jenny. Yesterday this was just an idea. Today it's real." "I've had years to plan," I replied, offering her a seat at the small conference table. "Just needed the right moment to act." Crystal placed a sleek folder on the table between us. "Then you're going to appreciate this. Meridian is hosting a Women in Finance symposium next week. We need a keynote speaker with a fresh perspective." She slid the folder toward me. "Someone who understands both sides of the equation, corporate finance and the unique challenges women entrepreneurs face." I opened the folder to find a formal invitation to be the featured speaker at an event that would put Phoenix Capital in front of every major financial player in the city, including, undoubtedly, representatives from Michael's firm. I struggled to find the right word. Perfect timing, Crystal finished for me. Your official coming out party to the business world. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Fair warning, this will put you on Michael's radar, in a very public way. Are you prepared for that? Was I? The symposium was scheduled for next Thursday, less than a week away. Michael would be back from Tokyo tomorrow. By next week, he would know about the Porsche, about Phoenix Capital, about my sudden transformation from supportive wife to business competitor. Absolutely, I said, making my decision. It's time to step out of the shadows. Crystal's smile was both approving and slightly predatory. I realized she might have her own reasons for helping me establish a business that could potentially disrupt Michael's firm. The financial world was, after all, built on strategic alliances and carefully calculated moves. One more thing, Crystal said, reaching into her briefcase. This might interest you. She handed me another document, this one bearing the Lancaster Group logo. Jacob Harris shared their current investment portfolio with me. Look at their most recent acquisition. I scanned the document, my eyes widening as I spotted a familiar name, Nakamura Technologies. That's Michael's Tokyo deal, Crystal confirmed. Apparently, Lancaster outbid Pearson Dynamics at the last minute. That's why he's been stuck there all week, trying to salvage the relationship. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Michael hadn't missed our anniversary for a successful business closing. He'd missed it to deal with a catastrophic failure. Losing. A client he'd been courting for months to his biggest competitor. He didn't tell me, I said, though I don't know why I was surprised. Michael never shared his failures, only his successes. Men like Michael rarely admit defeat, Crystal observed, especially not to their wives. Former wives, I corrected. Quietly, the words forming in my mind and emerging from my lips before I'd consciously decided to say them. I'm filing for divorce. Crystal didn't look shocked. Instead, she nodded as if I'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. I assumed as much when you mentioned starting your own firm. Just be prepared. Divorce means disclosure of assets. Including the Porsche proceeds, I acknowledged. Unless those assets have been reinvested in a business entity with its own legal standing. Crystal's smile was knowing. Something to discuss with your attorney. As Crystal left, I sat at my new desk, processing everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. I'd sold Michael's prized possession, secured initial funding for Phoenix Capital, established an office, formed strategic partnerships with 2 major financial institutions, and mentally committed to ending my marriage. All because Michael had canceled yet another anniversary dinner. No, I corrected myself. Not because of one canceled dinner, because of 12 years of canceled dinners, missed vacations, diminished dreams, and the slow erosion of my identity until I was nothing more than an extension of Michael Reynolds' corporate success story. Picked up my phone and made one more call to Marcus Blackwell, the city's most prominent divorce attorney, known for his ruthless efficiency in high net worth separations. I need to schedule a consultation, I told his receptionist. It's about initiating divorce proceedings against Michael Reynolds of Pearson Dynamics. There was a brief pause before she responded. Mr. Blackwell has an opening tomorrow at 9 a.m. Would that work for you? Perfect, I replied, mentally calculating that Michael's flight wouldn't land until tomorrow evening. By the time he arrived home to an empty garage and an absent wife, I would have already begun the legal process of disentangling our lives. The receptionist's voice softened slightly. Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Blackwell asks that all new clients bring comprehensive financial records to their initial consultation. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds. I have everything, I assured her. Of course I did. I'd managed our household with the same meticulous attention to detail that I was now applying to dismantling it. And please tell Mr. Blackwell that I'm particularly interested in discussing how to protect a newly established business in divorce proceedings. As I ended the call, my phone immediately lit up with a text from Michael. Negotiations still ongoing. Might need to extend trip through weekend. Don't be mad, babe. Big things happening here. Big things indeed, just not the ones he thought. Isn't it amazing how quickly your life can change when you finally decide to value yourself? If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now. Your support helps me bring more incredible real-life transformation stories to this channel. Now, let's see what happens when Ginny meets with the divorce attorney while Michael remains clueless in Tokyo. My meeting with Marcus Blackwell was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp at his downtown office, a sleek, imposing building that occupied prime real estate in the financial district. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in one of the power suits I'd purchased that morning, a far cry from the feminine dresses Michael preferred me in. The receptionist, a poised woman with an assessing gaze, led me into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and an impressive view of the city skyline. Marcus Blackwell stood as I entered, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to winning. "Mrs. Reynolds," he greeted me, his handshake firm. "Please, have a seat." I placed my carefully organized portfolio on his desk. "I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice, Mr. Blackwell." He sat across from me, hands steepled. When my receptionist mentioned Michael Reynolds' wife was seeking representation, I made it a priority. "I've followed your husband's career with interest." "Then you understand what I'm up against," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "Michael doesn't lose gracefully." A slight smile crossed Marcus's face. "Neither do I, Mrs. Reynolds. Now tell me why you're here today." For the next 30 minutes, I outlined my situation, the years of emotional neglect, the recently missed anniversary, the sale of the Porsche, and the establishment of Phoenix Capital. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally making notes but mostly watching me with analytical precision. "So, to summarize," he said when I'd finished, "you've liquidated a significant asset without your husband's knowledge, used the proceeds to fund a business that potentially competes with his firm's interests, and now wish to file for divorce before he returns from his business trip. Put that way, it sounded calculating, perhaps even vindictive, but I didn't flinch. I've taken steps to secure my financial independence after years of sublimating my career for his benefit," I corrected. "The timing is practical, not punitive." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Reynolds." "Ginny, please." "Ginny," he amended. "In my 25 years practicing family law, I've represented countless spouses in high-net-worth divorces. Most come in here devastated, uncertain, afraid of the future." He studied me with newfound respect. "You're different. You've already begun strategically repositioning yourself." "I've had a lot of time to think," I replied simply. "Clearly." He opened the portfolio I'd provided, quickly scanning the meticulously organized financial records. "This is thorough. Most clients can't provide half this documentation even after weeks of preparation." I managed our household with the same attention to detail I'm now applying to my business. Marcus nodded, continuing to review the documents. "The Porsche sale complicates things. Technically, as marital property, he's entitled to half its value." "I anticipated that," I said, pulling out an additional document I'd prepared. "This is a record of all the investment opportunities I declined at Michael's insistence over the past 12 years, with projected returns calculated. The total potential earnings I sacrificed significantly exceed the value of the Porsche." Marcus's eyebrows raised slightly as he reviewed my calculations. "This is unusually comprehensive." "I have an MBA, I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Financial analysis is my specialty." "So I see." He set the document aside. Regarding Phoenix Capital, establishing a business during divorce proceedings is tricky. Courts generally consider new business ventures to be marital assets subject to division, unless the business was funded primarily through a grant or competition prize, I countered, sliding across the notification of my $50,000 award. The Phoenix Fund contribution technically represents the majority stakeholder investment, with my personal contribution being minority capital. Marcus's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine admiration. You've done your homework. I spent 12 years watching Michael structure deals to maximize his advantage. I paid attention. For the next hour, we outlined a strategic approach to filing for divorce, timing the petition to coincide with my public debut at the Women in Finance Symposium, securing temporary orders to prevent Michael from interfering with Phoenix Capital, and documenting the years of sacrificed opportunities to counter any claims against the Porsche sale. One final question, Marcus said as our meeting concluded. Are you prepared for how public this might become? Michael Reynolds is a prominent figure in the financial community. Your emergence as both his soon-to-be ex-wife and a business competitor will generate significant attention. I thought about the years I'd spent in the background, the countless times I'd been introduced simply as Michael's wife, the polite smiles and dismissive glances from his colleagues who saw me as merely decorative. Mr. Blackwell, I've been invisible for 12 years. I'm ready to be seen. As I left his office, my phone pinged with a text notification. Michael again. Good news. Salvaged part of the Nakamura deal. Heading to celebration dinner with Tokyo team. Call you tomorrow? I tucked my phone away without responding and headed to my next appointment, a lunch meeting with Jacob Harris from the Lancaster Group. The restaurant he'd chosen was Maison Laurent, an exclusive French establishment where Michael and I had often entertained his clients. As I approached our table, I noted with interest that Jacob had brought colleagues, 3 other Lancaster executives, all men, all watching me with curious assessment as I approached. Mrs. Reynolds. Jacob stood to greet me. Thank you for joining. Allow me to introduce Marcus Denton, our CFO, Troy Bennett, Head of Acquisitions, and William Sparks, our Senior Investment Strategist. I shook each hand firmly, meeting their evaluating gazes with confident poise. Gentlemen, please call me Ginny, and thank you for making time in your schedules on such short notice. Crystal. Watson speaks very highly of you, Marcus Denton said as we settled into our seats. She claims you have unique insight into the women's investment market. And into Pearson Dynamics strategy, Troy Bennett added with less subtlety, earning a sharp glance from Jacob. I have significant experience in both areas, I acknowledged, unruffled by the implied question. But to be clear, I'm not here to share confidential information about my husband's firm. I'm here to discuss potential collaboration between Phoenix Capital and Lancaster Group that would benefit women entrepreneurs. Jacob smiled apologetically. Of course, though you must understand our curiosity, given your unique position. The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the delicate navigational challenge this meeting presented. I needed Lancaster's support for Phoenix Capital without compromising my integrity by trading on Michael's confidential information. A fine line to walk. Once the waiter departed, I opened my portfolio and extracted several documents. Gentlemen, let me share some data you might find interesting. Women-led startups receive less than 3% of venture capital despite delivering higher average returns than male-led companies. This represents not just a social inequity, but a missed market opportunity. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for Phoenix Capital, not as a competitor to traditional investment firms like Lancaster, but as a specialized advisor that could help them better evaluate and support women-led ventures. By the time our entrees arrived, I had their undivided attention. What you're proposing, William Sparks said thoughtfully, is essentially to become a specialized talent scout for undervalued assets in the market. Precisely, I confirmed. Phoenix Capital would identify promising women-led ventures, provide them with structured guidance to optimize their business models and presentations, then connect them with appropriate funding partners, like Lancaster Group. For a finder's fee, Marcus Denton noted, the CFO and him immediately identifying the revenue model. And advisory retainer, I added. Phoenix Capital would continue supporting these ventures post-funding, increasing their likelihood of success, and maximizing your return on investment. Jacob exchanged glances with his colleagues, a silent communication passing between them. We'd need to establish clear parameters around potential conflicts of interest, given your connection to Pearson. Dynamics. Absolutely, I agreed. Complete transparency is essential. And to that end, I should inform you that I'm initiating divorce proceedings against Michael. By the time any formal agreement between Phoenix Capital and Lancaster Group would take effect, that connection will be legally severed. The revelation created a momentary silence around the table, followed by renewed interest from the Lancaster executives. Troy Bennett leaned forward, his expression calculating. "The Nakamura deal," he said. "How much do you know about it?" I maintained a neutral expression. Only that Lancaster successfully outbid Pearson Dynamics. The specifics of either firm's offer would be confidential. But you must have insights into why Pearson wanted them so badly, he pressed. This was the dangerous territory I'd anticipated. The attempt to extract insider information about Michael's business strategies. I took a deliberate sip of water before responding. Gentlemen, let me be very clear. My value to Lancaster, or any potential partner, isn't in sharing confidential information about my soon-to-be ex-husband's business. It's in my expertise regarding women entrepreneurs and my ability to identify undervalued investment opportunities that others might overlook. If that's not sufficient basis for collaboration, then perhaps we should conclude this lunch. For a tense moment, I thought I'd overplayed my hand. Then Jacob Harris broke into a genuine smile. "Crystal said you had integrity," he commented approvingly. "She was right." Marcus Denton nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced with professional respect. "Your proposal has merit, Ms. Reynolds. Lancaster has been looking to diversify our portfolio with exactly the kind of ventures you specialize in. We'd like to move forward with a preliminary agreement," Jacob confirmed. "Our legal team can draft terms for a consulting relationship to begin immediately, with potential for more formal partnership once your personal situation is resolved." As we concluded our lunch, agreeing to have our respective legal teams hammer out the details of our arrangement, I felt a growing confidence in Phoenix Capital's viability. In just 3 days, I'd secured initial funding, established a physical office, obtained high-profile legal representation for my divorce, and now formed a strategic alliance with one of the city's major investment firms. All while Michael remained, oblivious in Tokyo, celebrating his salvaged deal, unaware that his perfect life was unraveling thread by thread. Outside the restaurant, Jacob Harris held back as his colleagues headed toward their waiting car. "One more thing, Ginny," he said, quietly. "The Women in Finance Symposium next week. I understand you're the keynote speaker?" "Word travels fast," I observed. "In our circles, yes." His expression grew serious. "Michael will be there. Pearson Dynamics is a major sponsor." The news shouldn't have surprised me. Pearson routinely sponsored financial industry events, but the confirmation that Michael would witness my public debut sent a jolt of anxiety through me. "Thank you for the warning," I said, maintaining my composure. Jacob studied me with newfound curiosity. "You know, when we outbid Pearson for Nakamura, Michael blamed it on family distractions, said he needed to focus more on business and less on home life. The irony was so perfect I couldn't help but laugh. Well, he's about to get his wish." The next morning, I woke early in my new reality, sleeping in the guest room of Olivia's apartment, preparing for a day of building Phoenix Capital rather than planning Michael's social calendar. I checked my phone out of habit, unsurprised. to find several messages from him. Landing at 8 p.m. tonight. Can't wait to see you. Picked up something special from that jewelry store you love. Miss you, babe. Sorry again about our dinner. Still no mention of our anniversary. Just our dinner, as if it had been an ordinary evening rather than the celebration of 12 years together. I set the phone aside without responding and began preparing for the day ahead. By noon, I'd finalized the office setup, approved Olivia's preliminary designs for Phoenix Capital's branding, and received the draft consulting agreement from Lancaster Group's legal team. Things were progressing faster than I'd dared hope. Crystal called just as I was reviewing the contract terms. "How's the keynote coming along?" she asked without preamble. "The symposium's corporate sponsors are buzzing about your participation. Everyone's curious about the mysterious financial advisor who specializes in women entrepreneurs. The speech is nearly finished," I assured her, though in truth I'd barely started it. "But I need your advice on something. Jacob Harris mentioned that Pearson Dynamics is sponsoring the event." Crystal's tone shifted slightly. "Yes, I was going to mention that. Michael is scheduled to present the closing remarks." I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new complication. "So, I'll be opening the symposium, and he'll be closing it. Poetic, isn't it?" Crystal sounded almost amused. "The estranged power couple bookending the event. The publicity will be incredible for both the symposium and Phoenix Capital." I wasn't as convinced. Michael doesn't yet know about Phoenix Capital, or the divorce, or the Porsche. When will he find out? "Tonight," I admitted. "He lands at 8. There was a brief silence on the line. "Well," Crystal finally said, "that should give him a week to process before the symposium. Hopefully, his public persona will win out over any personal resentment when you're both on stage. And if it doesn't, then the financial community gets treated to the kind of drama they secretly live for, and Phoenix Capital becomes the most talked about new firm in the city." Crystal's pragmatism was oddly reassuring. "Either way, you win." After we hung up, I sat in my new office contemplating the week ahead. Michael would discover the Porsche's absence tonight. By tomorrow, the divorce papers would be served. Within days, news of Phoenix Capital would reach him. And next Thursday, we would share a stage at the Women in Finance Symposium. It was a lot for anyone to process, even someone as adaptable as Michael. Part of me, a small, wavering part that still remembered the early years of our marriage, felt a twinge of guilt for the shock he was about to experience. Then I remembered all the shocks I'd endured silently: the canceled vacations, the missed birthdays, the gradual erosion of my identity until I was nothing more than an extension of Michael Reynolds' corporate success story. The guilt evaporated, replaced by steely resolve. At 3:00, I received an email that momentarily stole my breath. The Phoenix Fund had deposited the full $50,000 grant into Phoenix Capital's account. Combined with the Porsche proceeds, I now had over $265,000 in operating capital. More than enough to launch aggressively and sustain operations until the Lancaster consulting agreement started generating revenue. Forwarded the notification to Marcus Blackwell with a brief note. Additional documentation for our filing. Phoenix Capital now officially funded by outside investors. His response was prompt. Excellent timing. Petition prepared for filing. Tomorrow morning. Temporary orders to protect business assets included. Everything was falling into place with a precision that felt almost predestined. At 5, Olivia texted, "Celebration dinner still on. Reservations at Delmonico's at 6. Non-negotiable." I smiled, realizing I needed this moment of normalcy amidst the whirlwind of change. "See you there, and thank you for everything." Delmonico's was one of the city's oldest and most respected steakhouses, a place where business deals were celebrated, and significant life events marked with appropriate gravity. Michael and I had dined there often, usually with clients or colleagues. Tonight would be different. a celebration of my independence rather than his success. Olivia was waiting at a corner booth when I arrived, already sipping a martini. "There she is," she announced as I slid into the seat across from her. "The woman who sold her husband's Porsche to fund her dream." I laughed despite myself. "When you put it that way, it sounds slightly unhinged." "The best decisions usually do." She raised her glass to Phoenix Capital and its fearless founder. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in days, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. With Olivia, I could be both the confident businesswoman I was becoming and the vulnerable friend still processing the end of my marriage. "How are you really doing with all this?" she asked after we'd ordered. The Ginny I've known for a decade would have agonized for months before taking such decisive steps. I considered the question carefully. I think I've been preparing for this moment for years without consciously acknowledging it. Every time Michael canceled something important, every time he dismissed my ideas or ambitions, I filed it away. Eventually, the evidence became too overwhelming to ignore. "The anniversary dinner was just the final straw," Olivia suggested. "Exactly." Though finding out he was actually in Tokyo dealing with a failed deal rather than celebrating a success was illuminating. He couldn't even be honest about why he was missing our anniversary. Olivia reached across the table to squeeze my hand briefly. "You know he's going to fight back when he realizes what you've done. Men like Michael don't lose gracefully." "So I've been told," I acknowledged, thinking of Marcus Blackwell's similar assessment. But for the first time, I'm not facing Michael from a position of disadvantage. I have my own counsel, my own business, my own funding. We're on equal footing. Our steaks arrived, perfectly prepared and accompanied by sides that would have cost half a month's grocery budget for many families. Once, I might have felt guilty about such indulgence. Tonight, I savored every bite as the rightful reward for years of deferred gratification. "To unexpected journeys," Olivia toasted as we shared a decadent chocolate dessert. "And to the women brave enough to take them." By the time we finished dinner, it was nearly 8. Michael's flight would be landing soon. I checked my phone, noting with grim amusement that he'd sent another message while we were eating. "Just landed. Heading home. Can't wait to see you." Home. A word that had once conjured comfort and belonging now felt hollow. The sprawling mansion with its imported furnishings and carefully curated art was Michael's showcase, not our sanctuary. I couldn't imagine returning there tonight, facing the inevitable confrontation while exhausted from the emotional and professional marathon of the past few days. "You're staying at my place again," Olivia declared, reading my expression perfectly. "At least for tonight. Let him stew in his confusion a little longer." I nodded gratefully. "I'll face him tomorrow, after I've finalized the last details with Marcus. And after the Porsche transaction has fully cleared," Olivia added practically. "Best not to have that conversation while the funds are still theoretically reversible." We shared a cab back to her apartment, the city lights blurring through the windows as I contemplated the final hours of my life as Michael Reynolds' wife. By this time tomorrow, the divorce petition would be filed, the temporary orders in place, and Phoenix Capital legally protected from his potential interference. My phone began buzzing repeatedly as we rode, Michael calling rather than texting now. I silenced it without answering. "He's home," I said unnecessarily. "And he's noticed the Porsche is missing." Olivia squeezed my hand. "Are you sure you don't want to answer? Rip the bandage off?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I need one more night of peace before the storm." The buzzing continued intermittently throughout the evening, along with increasingly urgent text messages. "Where are you?" "The Porsche is gone. Did something happen?" "Ginny, I'm worried. Please call me ASAP." "I've called the police to report the car stolen." That last one made me smile grimly. The police would inform him that as an authorized driver, On the car's registration and insurance, I had every legal right to sell it. His attempt to report it stolen would only document his ignorance of my legitimate claim to the vehicle. Around midnight, a final text came through. I don't know what's going on, but we need to talk. I'll be at the office early tomorrow if you want to meet somewhere neutral. Please, Ginny. Whatever this is, we can work it out. For a moment, just a moment, I felt that old familiar pull to smooth things over, to manage Michael's emotions as I'd done for 12 years. Then I remembered the lunch with Lancaster Group, Jacob's casual mention that Michael had blamed his business failure on family distractions. I turned off my phone completely and went to bed in Olivia's guest room, sleeping more soundly than I had in years. Morning brought a flood of notifications when I turned my phone back on. 19 missed calls from Michael, 27 text messages, and 3 voicemails, each progressively more concerned and confused. I listened to the final one as I prepared for my day. Ginny, I don't know what's happening, but I'm trying to understand. The police say you had the right to sell the Porsche? Is that true? Why would you do that? Where are you staying? Please call me. We need to talk. His voice sounded genuinely bewildered, perhaps even hurt. For the first time, Michael Reynolds was experiencing what it felt like to be left in the dark, to have significant decisions made without his input or approval. Welcome to my world for the past 12 years, I thought as I deleted the voicemail. Had a busy day ahead, finalizing details with Marcus Blackwell, signing the consulting agreement with Lancaster Group, and preparing my keynote for the symposium. Michael would have to wait a little longer for his answers. At precisely 9 a.m., Marcus called to confirm that the divorce petition had been filed and the temporary orders issued. The orders protect Phoenix Capital's assets from any potential interference, he explained. They also establish temporary support to maintain your current lifestyle during proceedings. Michael has been officially served at his office. I glanced at my watch, 9:05 a.m. Michael would be receiving the divorce papers right about now, delivered by a process server to Pearson Dynamics' executive floor. I could almost picture his expression as he realized this wasn't a simple misunderstanding about a car, but the systematic dismantling of the life he'd taken for granted. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. What happens next? Michael will likely contact his own counsel immediately. Given the high-profile nature of your divorce and the significant assets involved, I expect aggressive pushback on several fronts, particularly regarding Phoenix Capital and the Porsche sale. But the temporary orders protect the business? Yes, though he can challenge them. The question will be whether the court sees Phoenix Capital as a marital asset or as a separate entity funded primarily through grants and competitions. I nodded, though Marcus couldn't see me through the phone. Hence the importance of the Phoenix Fund documentation. Precisely. Your preparation has been exemplary, Ginny. Most clients in your position are reactive rather than proactive. After we hung up, I sat quietly in my office, absorbing the gravity of what had just occurred. I had officially filed for divorce from Michael Reynolds, the man who had been the center of my universe for 12 years. The legal machinery was now in motion, transforming our private grievances into public record. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Michael again. This time, I answered. Divorce papers, Ginny? Really? His voice was tight with controlled anger. You couldn't even discuss this with me first? Like you discussed missing our anniversary for a business deal that actually failed? I replied, my tone deliberately neutral. Or how you discussed claiming family distractions were responsible for losing the Nakamura account? There was a moment of stunned silence. How do you know about Nakamura? He finally asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I know many things you assume I don't, Michael. That's part of the problem. Where are you? He demanded. We need to talk about this face to face. And what the hell happened to my Porsche? I sold it, I said simply. To fund Phoenix Capital. Phoenix what? What are you talking about? My financial advisory firm specializing in women-led businesses. It's been quite successful already. We've secured initial funding and signed a consulting agreement with Lancaster Group just yesterday. Another long, shocked silence. Lancaster Group? My biggest competitor? Is this some kind of joke? Not at all. In fact, I'm the keynote speaker at next week's Women in Finance Symposium. I believe you're giving the closing remarks? It should be an interesting event. I could almost hear the gears turning in Michael's mind as he struggled to process everything. I was telling him the divorce, the sold Porsche, the new business, the Lancaster connection, and now a public speaking engagement at a high-profile industry event. Ginny, he said finally, his voice now carefully modulated to the persuasive tone he used in tough negotiations. I think we need to take a step back here. Whatever issues we're having, surely we can work them out without such extreme measures. That might have been possible once, I acknowledged. But not anymore. Not after 12 years of canceled plans and deferred dreams. Not after you blamed family distractions for your business failures while I was sitting alone at our anniversary dinner. Is that what this is about? The anniversary? I told you, the Tokyo deal failed. I finished for him. Yes, I know. Yet you let me believe you were celebrating a success rather than damage control. Just one more deception in a marriage built on them. Michael's tone hardened. You've been talking to someone at Lancaster. That's corporate espionage, Ginny. It could have serious legal consequences. I almost laughed at his attempt to intimidate me. No, Michael. I haven't shared any confidential information about Pearson Dynamics. I've simply established my own professional identity after years of subjugating it to yours. The fact that this threatens you speaks volumes about our relationship. This isn't over, he warned. The Porsche, this business you think you've started with my money. I'll fight you on all of it. I expected nothing less, I replied calmly. Marcus Blackwell is handling my case. Your attorney can contact him directly with any questions. I ended the call before Michael could respond, my heart racing despite my outward composure. The confrontation I'd been avoiding had finally happened, and while it had gone largely as expected, the reality of Michael's anger was still unsettling. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Olivia. How did it go? About as expected, I replied. He threatened legal action. Of course he did. Men like Michael only understand power, and you just showed him you have it. The next few days unfolded in a blur of legal maneuvers and business development. As promised, Michael fought back aggressively, filing motions challenging the temporary orders protecting Phoenix Capital and demanding immediate accounting of the Porsche proceeds. Marcus seemed almost energized by the opposition. This is exactly what I predicted, he said during our daily update call. Michael's attorney is trying to characterize Phoenix Capital as a marital asset developed using joint funds. And our response? I asked, reviewing the latest legal documents he'd forwarded. We've countered with evidence that Phoenix Capital was primarily funded through grants and competitions, with your contribution representing previously gifted personal funds. Marcus's tone was confidently professional. The temporary orders should hold until the preliminary hearing next month. Next month? I couldn't hide my surprise. I thought these issues would be resolved more quickly. High net worth divorces rarely move swiftly, Ginny. Michael's team is deliberately drawing out the initial phases, likely hoping you'll run out of resources or resolve. I smiled grimly. He doesn't realize I've been preparing for this battle longer than he has. Precisely. Now, regarding the Women in Finance Symposium tomorrow, have you prepared for potential public confrontation? The symposium. In the whirlwind of legal filings and business meetings, I'd almost forgotten that tomorrow would mark my first public appearance as Phoenix Capital's founder, and my first face-to-face encounter with Michael since our separation. I've completed my keynote, I assured Marcus. It focuses exclusively on the funding gap for women entrepreneurs, with no mention of personal circumstances. Good. Maintain that professional detachment regardless of provocation. Michael may attempt to discredit you publicly, especially given your consulting arrangement with Lancaster Group. After we hung up, I reviewed my keynote one final time, trying to anticipate and address any vulnerabilities Michael might exploit. The speech was solid, data-driven, compelling, and carefully crafted to establish my expertise without revealing confidential information from either Pearson Dynamics or Lancaster Group. My phone rang again. Crystal this time. Final preparations for tomorrow? She asked without preamble. Just reviewing my keynote. How's the attendee list looking? Standing room only, she replied, satisfaction evident in her voice. Word has spread about Phoenix Capital's founder. Making her debut, and the financial community loves nothing more than fresh blood, especially when that blood has connections to both Pearson Dynamics and Lancaster Group. I sighed. I'd prefer they focus on my business model rather than my personal drama. In an ideal world, perhaps. But you know as well as I do that the financial sector runs on relationships and reputations. Your connection to Michael, and your decision to strike out on your own, makes for an irresistible narrative. She wasn't wrong. In the days since filing for divorce, I'd received dozens of LinkedIn connection requests from financial professionals I'd never met, along with speaking invitations for other industry events. Phoenix Capital was generating buzz not just for its innovative approach to women's funding, but for the dramatic circumstances of its founding. Has Michael confirmed his participation? I asked, trying to sound casual. Not only confirmed, but requested schedule adjustments to ensure he'll be present for your keynote, Crystal replied. Apparently, he's very interested in hearing what his wife has to say about women in finance. The emphasis she placed on wife wasn't subtle. Despite the divorce filing, the financial community still viewed me primarily through my relationship to Michael, a perception I was determined to change. Beginning with tomorrow's speech. Soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected mildly, and he'll find my observations on industry gender disparities quite educational. After finishing with Crystal, I called Olivia to confirm our pre-symposium preparation plans. As both my closest friend and my marketing director, she would be accompanying me tomorrow, providing both emotional support and business legitimacy. Your power suit is pressed and ready, she assured me. And I've prepared press kits for any media attending the symposium. Phoenix Capital's branding will be impossible to ignore. Thank you, I said sincerely. For everything, Liv. I couldn't have done this without you. Please, she scoffed good-naturedly. You've been preparing for this moment since the day Michael first suggested you scale back your career ambitions. I just provided the guest room and moral support. Later that evening, as I was finalizing my presentation slides in Olivia's apartment, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it to find a message from Gracie, Michael's executive assistant at Pearson Dynamics. Ginny, I thought you should know. Michael's making significant changes to his closing remarks for tomorrow. He's been closed in his office with the legal team all afternoon. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Take care. I stared at the message, surprised by both its content and its sender. Gracie and I had always been cordial, but I wouldn't have described us as close. For her to risk her position by warning me suggested that whatever Michael was planning went beyond ordinary professional rivalry. I forwarded the text to Marcus, adding, "Should we be concerned?" His response came quickly. Not unexpected. We'll have associate attend symposium as precaution. Maintain professional demeanor regardless of provocation. I put down my phone, trying to focus on my presentation rather than the looming confrontation. Whatever Michael was planning, I needed to be prepared, not just with my keynote, but emotionally and strategically for whatever public challenge he might present. The morning of the symposium dawned bright and clear, as if the universe were spotlight lighting this pivotal moment in my professional reinvention. I woke early, taking extra care with my appearance. The woman who stared back at me from Olivia's guest bathroom mirror looked polished, confident, and utterly unfamiliar. Not just because of the power suit and severe updo, but because of the resolute determination in her eyes. "Ready for your debut?" Olivia asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, accepting the caffeine gratefully. We arrived at the Wellington Hotel's grand ballroom 90 minutes before the symposium's official start, allowing time to review the stage setup and meet with Crystal's team. The space was impressive. Ornate chandeliers hanging from coffered ceilings, plush carpet muffling the sounds of the growing crowd, and a stage set with comfortable armchairs for the panel discussions that would follow my keynote. "We've seated you at the VIP table for lunch," Crystal informed me, consulting her tablet. "Lancaster Group executives on one side, Meridian Financial on the other. And Michael? Head table with the other major sponsors." She glanced up, studying my expression. "We can rearrange if needed." I shook my head. "No need. I can maintain professional courtesy for a few hours." Crystal looked skeptical but nodded. "Your keynote is scheduled for 9:15, immediately following the welcome address. Michael's closing remarks are at 4:30, with the networking reception after." "Perfect. That gives me plenty of time to make an impact before he speaks." As we conducted our final microphone check, I noticed Marcus Blackwell's associate, a sharp-looking young woman named Valerie, taking a seat near the back of the room. She nodded discreetly in my direction, a silent confirmation that legal support was present if needed. By 9, the ballroom was filled to capacity, exactly as Crystal had predicted. Financial executives, investment bankers, wealth managers, and venture capitalists formed a sea of dark suits, with a noticeable but still minority presence of women scattered throughout. I scanned the crowd from my position backstage, finally spotting Michael in the front row, deep in conversation with Pearson Dynamics legal counsel. He looked immaculate as always, but I noticed subtle signs of strain, the slight tension around his eyes, the too rigid posture, the way he kept checking his watch. For a man who prided himself on projecting unflappable confidence, these were telling indicators of his inner turmoil. Good. Let him feel a fraction of the anxiety I'd experienced over years of molding my life to accommodate his. The symposium chair took the stage promptly at 9:00, welcoming attendees and acknowledging the event's sponsors. I observed with sardonic amusement how she gave special thanks to Pearson Dynamics, represented today by founder and CEO Michael Reynolds, triggering polite applause. "And now," the chair continued, "I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, a new voice in financial advisory with a fascinating perspective on women's access to capital. Please welcome Ginny Reynolds, founder of Phoenix Capital." The applause was curious rather than enthusiastic. These people didn't know me yet, but they were intrigued by the novelty of my presence and, undoubtedly, by my connection to Michael. That would change by the time I finished speaking. I took the stage with deliberate confidence, making eye contact with various sections of the audience, but carefully avoiding Michael's gaze. The podium felt solid beneath my hands as I arranged my notes, then looked up to address the assembled financial elite. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and carrying clearly through the excellent sound system. "Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm here today to discuss what I believe represents not just an ethical failure in our industry, but a missed financial opportunity of staggering proportions. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out a compelling case for increased investment in women-led businesses, backed by research demonstrating their superior return on investment, despite receiving a fraction of available venture capital. I outlined Phoenix Capital's innovative approach to bridging this gap, not through charity or social justice initiatives, but through sound financial strategy. When we overlook women entrepreneurs, I concluded, we aren't just perpetuating inequality, we're leaving money on the table. Phoenix Capital aims to redirect that capital to where the returns are highest, benefiting investors and entrepreneurs alike. Because in finance, as in life, sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones hiding in plain sight, consistently underestimated until they reveal their true worth. The applause that followed was no longer merely curious. It was appreciative, even impressed. As I stepped away from the podium, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Michael. His expression was complex, a mixture of anger, surprise, and something that might almost have been pride, quickly suppressed. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of panel discussions and networking conversations. Executives who had barely acknowledged me at Michael's corporate events now approached eagerly, business cards extended, seeking meetings to discuss potential collaborations with Phoenix Capital. Several women entrepreneurs cornered me between sessions, sharing stories of funding rejection that echoed the statistics I'd cited in my keynote. By lunchtime, I'd collected more business cards than I could easily count, and had scheduled follow-up meetings with 3 potential major investors. Phoenix Capital wasn't just a concept anymore. It was a recognized presence in the financial community, its value proposition clearly understood and increasingly sought after. I made my way to the designated VIP table, noting with grim amusement that the seating arrangement placed me directly in Michael's line of sight from the head table. Whether Crystal had planned this strategic positioning or it was simply coincidence, the effect was powerful. Michael would spend the entire lunch watching other financial leaders actively courting his soon-to-be ex-wife's business expertise. Jacob. Harris from Lancaster Group stood as I approached, pulling out my chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "Brilliant keynote, Ginny. You've got the room buzzing." "Indeed," agreed Marcus Denton, Lancaster's CFO. "We've already received inquiries about our partnership with Phoenix Capital. Your emergence has created quite the stir." I smiled, accepting their compliments with practiced grace, while acutely aware of Michael watching from across the room, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes never leaving our table. "I notice your husband seems particularly attentive to our conversation," Jacob observed quietly, following my gaze. "Should we be concerned about his closing remarks?" "Ex-husband soon enough," I corrected. "And whatever he's planning, Phoenix Capital's value proposition stands on its own merits." Lunch progressed with stimulating conversation about market trends and investment strategies, the kind of professional dialogue I'd been excluded from for years despite my financial background and MBA. Occasionally, I caught Michael in whispered consultation with his legal counsel or typing furiously on his phone. Whatever countermove he was planning, he wasn't being subtle about it. As dessert was served, Crystal appeared at my elbow. "A moment, if you don't mind," she murmured, gesturing discreetly toward the hallway. I excused myself from the table and followed her to a quiet alcove away from curious ears. "One of my contacts on the symposium committee just shared something concerning," Crystal said without preamble. "Michael has submitted revised slides for his closing presentation that include direct references to Phoenix Capital, specifically questioning its founding ethics and potential conflicts of interest." My stomach tightened. He's planning to use his platform to publicly discredit me. It appears so. The committee is uncomfortable with it but hesitant to censor a major sponsor. Crystal's expression was grim. "You should prepare for a public attack." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Can you get me a copy of what he's planning to present?" "Already working on it. In the meantime, perhaps we should consider a preemptive move." I nodded slowly, an idea forming. "Is there any flexibility in the afternoon schedule? Specifically the panel on emerging trends in financial advisory?" Crystal checked her tablet. "Some. What are you thinking?" "I believe it's time to address the elephant in the room, directly and on my terms, before Michael has the chance to control the narrative." Crystal's eyes gleamed with understanding. "I'll speak to the panel moderator immediately. What exactly do you have in mind?" "A slight adjustment to the discussion topics," I explained. "Something that allows me to acknowledge my unique position and address potential concerns about conflicts of interest proactively." As Crystal hurried off to make the arrangements, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For years, I'd navigated around Michael's moods and ego, carefully managing situations to avoid confrontation. Now I was deliberately stepping into one, but on my terms, not his. I returned to the VIP table to find Jacob Harris watching me with curious assessment. "Everything all right? You look like a woman plotting something significant." "Just a minor adjustment to the afternoon program," I replied, keeping my tone light. "The best defense is a good offense, after all." He nodded approvingly. "A principle Lancaster Group has always embraced. Speaking of which," he lowered his voice slightly, "our legal team has completed their review of your consulting agreement. We'd like to move forward immediately if you're amenable." "Even with the current complications?" I asked, surprised by their eagerness given Michael's obvious displeasure. Jacob smiled, the expression of a man comfortable with calculated risks, especially with the current complications. "Your keynote demonstrated precisely why we want Phoenix Capital's perspective. You see opportunities others miss because they're blinded by traditional assumptions." As lunch concluded, I excused myself to prepare for the afternoon sessions, finding a quiet corner where I could gather my thoughts. The Emerging Trends panel would start at 2:30, giving me just over an hour to plan my preemptive strike against whatever Michael was preparing. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Blackwell. "Valerie reports unusual activity from Michael's legal team. Stay vigilant. Remember, no direct accusations or revealing confidential information." I acknowledged his warning, then opened a new document on my tablet and began outlining key points for the panel discussion. Whatever approach I took needed to be measured, professional, and unassailable, allowing me to address the situation without appearing defensive or bitter. At precisely 2:25, I made my way to the designated staging area for the Emerging Trends panel. The moderator, a respected financial journalist named Olivia Palmer, approached with an iPad in hand. "Ms. Reynolds, Crystal briefed me on the situation. I've adjusted the discussion questions to include ethical considerations for new advisory firms, which should give you a natural opening to address your specific circumstances." She showed me the revised question list. "Will this work?" I scanned the document, noting the carefully worded additions. "This is perfect, thank you." "For what it's worth," she added in a lower voice. "I've interviewed Michael several times over the years. I always found it strange that he never mentioned his wife was a financial analyst with an MBA. The panel was comprised of 5 financial experts, including myself, 2 from established firms, 1 academic, and another founder of a boutique advisory service similar to Phoenix Capital, but focused on sustainable investments rather than women entrepreneurs. As we took our seats on stage, I noticed Michael slipping into the ballroom, positioning himself against the back wall where he could observe without being easily observed. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room, his expression unreadable from this distance. The moderator began with general questions about market trends and advisory innovations, allowing each panelist to establish their expertise before directing the conversation toward ethical considerations. "Financial advisory is fundamentally built on trust," she noted, addressing the panel broadly. "Yet new firms often face questions about their credibility and potential conflicts of interest. Ginny, as the founder of Phoenix Capital, how do you address these concerns, particularly given your unique personal situation?" The moment had arrived. I leaned slightly toward the microphone, conscious of every eye in the room upon me, including Michael's. "Thank you for raising that point, Olivia. You're right that trust is paramount in our industry, and new ventures must be particularly transparent about potential conflicts." I paused briefly, scanning the attentive audience. I believe it's important to address directly what many in this room are already discussing privately: my connection to Michael Reynolds and Pearson Dynamics. A ripple of surprised murmurs passed through the audience. Few had expected me to acknowledge the situation so openly. "Yes, I am currently in divorce proceedings from Michael Reynolds. Yes, Phoenix Capital was established during this transitional period in my personal life. And yes, I have signed a consulting agreement with Lancaster Group, a competitor to my soon-to-be ex-husband's firm. I could see Michael shift his position against the wall, his posture tensing. These facts might suggest potential ethical concerns, which is precisely why Phoenix Capital has established rigorous ethical guidelines that exceed industry standards. I detailed the firewall procedures we'd implemented to prevent any sharing of confidential information, the transparent disclosure policies for all client interactions, and the independent ethics committee we'd established to review any potentially problematic situations. My business model focuses on identifying and supporting women entrepreneurs, not competing directly with established firms like Pearson Dynamics. In fact, I see potential for collaboration rather than competition, as these entrepreneurs eventually grow into clients that larger firms might serve. The moderator nodded approvingly. So you're essentially creating a new client pipeline that benefits the entire industry? Exactly. Phoenix Capital aims to address a significant market gap, one that represents an opportunity for all financial institutions, not just my firm. I allowed myself a small smile. Sometimes personal transitions reveal professional opportunities we might otherwise overlook. The discussion continued with questions about specific ethical safeguards and transparency measures, each of which I addressed with calm confidence. By the time the panel concluded, I had effectively diffused Michael's potential attack by acknowledging the situation directly and demonstrating that Phoenix Capital had anticipated and addressed any legitimate concerns. As we left the stage, I noticed Michael was no longer in his position by the wall. Valerie, Marcus's associate, approached quickly. "Impressive preemptive move," she said quietly. "Michael left halfway through your ethics explanation. He's currently in a heated discussion with his legal team in the lobby. Is he modifying his closing remarks?" I asked, already knowing the answer. According to the AV team, they're completely revising his presentation. Apparently, his plan to question Phoenix Capital's ethical foundation doesn't work quite as well after your panel performance. I nodded, absorbing this information as Crystal joined us, barely containing her satisfaction. "The symposium chair is thrilled with how you handled that," she informed me. "Several attendees have already approached her praising your professionalism in addressing what could have been an awkward situation." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a series of networking conversations and session observations. I deliberately maintained a visible presence, engaging thoughtfully in discussions and building connections with potential clients and partners. The strategic purpose was clear, demonstrating to everyone, especially Michael, that I was a legitimate financial professional in my own right, not merely a corporate wife stepping into a role beyond her capabilities. By 4:15, attendees were gathering for Michael's closing remarks. I chose a seat near the middle of the ballroom, not hiding, but not provocatively front row either. Jacob Harris from Lancaster Group deliberately took the seat beside me, a public show of support that would not go unnoticed. "Ready for whatever he has planned?" Jacob murmured as the room filled. "As ready as I can be," I replied, maintaining a composed expression. Though I suspect our panel discussion forced some significant revisions. The symposium chair introduced Michael with the standard accolades about Pearson Dynamics' industry leadership and innovation. He took the stage with his characteristic confidence, though I noted the slight tightness around his eyes that signaled stress only to those who knew him intimately. "Thank you for that generous introduction," Michael began, his voice smooth and controlled. "And thank you to everyone who has participated in today's important discussions about the future of financial advisory services." He launched into prepared remarks about industry trends and challenges, noticeably avoiding any direct reference to Phoenix Capital or our personal situation. The presentation was polished and informative, but distinctly impersonal, a sharp contrast to his usual charismatic style. As he concluded his formal remarks, Michael paused, scanning the audience until his gaze found mine. Something flickered in his expression. Something almost like respect, quickly masked by professional detachment. "Before we close," he said, his voice taking on a more personal tone, "I want to acknowledge one of today's earlier speakers, Ginny." Reynolds highlighted a significant gap in our industry's approach to women entrepreneurs, a perspective that challenges us to reconsider established practices. I maintained a neutral expression, aware of Jacob tensing slightly beside me. This was not what we had expected. While Phoenix Capital and Pearson Dynamics may approach the market differently, Michael continued, I believe there's value in fresh perspectives that push our industry to evolve. After all, innovation rarely comes from comfortable consensus. The audience murmured with surprise at this unexpected diplomatic approach. I kept my face carefully composed, though inwardly I was analyzing every word for hidden barbs or strategic positioning. I look forward to seeing how these new approaches develop, he concluded smoothly. Thank you all for your attention and engagement today. The applause was enthusiastic but tinged with confusion. Many had anticipated drama given the rumors circulating about our personal situation. Instead, Michael had offered a professionally generous acknowledgement that neither embraced nor attacked Phoenix Capital. As attendees rose for the networking reception, Jacob leaned closer. Well played by both of you. He couldn't attack without seeming petty after your panel performance, so he opted for the high road. For now, I agreed, gathering my materials. The real battle is still happening through our attorneys. The reception area was elegantly arranged with high cocktail tables, past hors d'oeuvres, and strategically placed bars ensuring consistent circulation among attendees. I accepted a glass of champagne and prepared for the inevitable networking conversations, positioning myself near a group of venture capitalists who had shown particular interest during my keynote. I was deep in discussion about Phoenix Capital's evaluation metrics for women-led startups when I felt a presence at my shoulder. Without turning, I knew it was Michael. The subtle cologne he favored, and the particular quality of silence that fell over our immediate vicinity announced his arrival as clearly as a herald's trumpet. Ginny, he said simply, his voice carefully modulated to convey nothing beyond professional courtesy. Impressive keynote this morning. I turned to face him, equally composed. Thank you, Michael. Your closing remarks were quite diplomatic. We've always been better at public performance than private communication, haven't we? The question held a hint of genuine reflection beneath its polished surface. Around us, financial professionals pretended not to eavesdrop while hanging on every word of this unexpected interaction between estranged spouses at the center of industry, gossip. Perhaps that's been part of the problem, I acknowledged, keeping my tone even. Speaking of communication, I believe our attorneys are handling the necessary discussions now. Michael's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, the lawyers. Always so efficient at translating human relationships into contractual disputes. He glanced around at our attentive audience before continuing in a lower voice. Lancaster Group, Ginny? Really? Of all the potential partners you could have chosen? They recognized Phoenix Capital's value immediately, I replied simply, and they've been refreshingly supportive of my professional capabilities. Something flashed in Michael's eyes, regret, perhaps, or realization. Before he could respond, Jacob Harris appeared at my side with impeccable timing. Ginny, there's someone I'd like you to meet. The CFO of Westland Ventures is interested in discussing potential collaboration. He nodded cordially to Michael. Reynolds, excellent closing remarks. Very diplomatic. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on Michael, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Harris, I see Lancaster is wasting no time capitalizing on personal situations. Not at all, Jacob replied smoothly. We're simply recognizing exceptional talent, something Pearson might have benefited from doing sooner. He turned to me. Shall we? Westland doesn't make themselves available often. I nodded, offering Michael a polite smile. If you'll excuse me. I'm sure our attorneys will be in touch. As Jacob led me away, I could feel Michael's gaze following us across the room. This public interaction had established the new professional dynamic between us. Courteous, but distant, with the undercurrents of our personal conflict carefully contained beneath a veneer of business etiquette. Round 1 to Phoenix Capital, Jacob murmured as we approached the Westland executives, but Michael Reynolds isn't known for accepting defeat gracefully. This wasn't about winning or losing, I corrected him quietly. It was about establishing Phoenix Capital as a legitimate entity independent of my personal situation. And you've done that brilliantly, Jacob agreed. Now comes the real challenge, delivering on the promises your keynote made. The financial world is watching, Ginny. What will Phoenix Capital show them? It was a fair question, perhaps the most important one. I had successfully navigated the symposium, neutralized Michael's potential attack, and introduced Phoenix Capital to the financial community. But speeches and panels were just the beginning. Now came the real work of building a successful advisory firm that could truly change how women entrepreneurs accessed capital. As the evening progressed, I moved purposefully through the reception, collecting business cards, scheduling follow-up meetings, and solidifying connections with potential clients and partners. Each conversation represented another thread in the professional network I was weaving. A network entirely my own, not borrowed from or dependent on Michael's position. By the time the reception concluded, I had accumulated more promising contacts in one day than Michael had introduced me to in 12 years of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. His dismissal of my professional capabilities had ultimately forced me to prove them in the most public and dramatic way possible. Outside the hotel, Olivia was waiting with our car, eager for details about the day's events. As we drove away from the Wellington, I caught a glimpse of Michael standing alone by the valet station, watching our departure with an unreadable expression. "So," Olivia prompted once we were underway, "how did it go? Crystal texted me that you completely neutralized Michael's planned attack." "It went surprisingly well," I admitted, finally allowing myself to relax slightly. "Phoenix Capital is officially on the map. We have meetings scheduled with 3 venture capital firms, a potential partnership with Westland Ventures, and the Lancaster Agreement is finalized." "And Michael?" I considered the question, remembering the complex emotions that had flickered across his face during our brief interaction. "Michael is recalculating. For possibly the first time in our relationship, he's seeing me as a professional equal rather than a supportive accessory." "Good," Olivia declared emphatically. "It's about time. Though I'm surprised he didn't fight harder today." "Today was just the public skirmish," I reminded her. "The real battle is happening through our attorneys. Michael won't concede anything valuable without a fight, not the house, not financial assets, and certainly not his professional reputation." As if summoned by this observation, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Blackwell. "Michael's counsel has requested emergency hearing to freeze Phoenix Capital assets pending full financial disclosure. Preparing counter-motion. Will call in morning with details." I showed the message to Olivia, who sighed in frustration. "So much for professional courtesy. He's going straight for your business." "Of course he is," I replied, unsurprised. Phoenix Capital represents not just financial independence, but a direct challenge to the narrative he's constructed about me for 12 years. He can't allow it to succeed without admitting he was wrong. "And the Porsche?" Olivia asked. "Any movement on that front?" "His attorneys are demanding full compensation for unauthorized sale of valuable property," I quoted from the latest legal filing. "Marcus is countering with my calculations of foregone career earnings during our marriage." Olivia shook her head in amazement. "When you decided to reclaim your independence, you certainly didn't do it halfway. Half measures never accomplish anything worthwhile," I said, thinking of all the years I'd spent compromising my ambitions to accommodate Michael's. "Sometimes you have to sell the Porsche to fund the future you deserve." The following morning began with an urgent call from Marcus Blackwell, his normally composed voice tinged with rare excitement. "Ginny, you're not going to believe this. Michael's emergency motion to freeze Phoenix Capital's assets has backfired spectacularly." I sat up straighter in Olivia's guest bed, instantly alert. "What happened?" "Judge Harriman is presiding over your case. She's known for her strong views on financial independence in divorce proceedings. She not only denied Michael's motion, but issued a strongly worded statement about the importance of supporting entrepreneurial endeavors during marriage dissolution." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "So Phoenix Capital's assets are protected?" "Better than that," Marcus continued. "The judge has specifically prohibited Michael from taking any actions that might interfere with your business operations or relationships. He's essentially been legally barred from undermining Phoenix Capital in any way." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by vindication. "That's incredible news." "There's more," Marcus added. "Judge Harriman has expedited the financial discovery process. Michael's team has 7 days to provide complete disclosure of all Pearson Dynamics holdings and his personal assets." The implications were significant. Michael had always been secretive about certain aspects of his finances, particularly his offshore investments and the exact structure of his ownership stake in Pearson Dynamics. Expedited discovery would force transparency he'd likely been hoping to avoid. "Has Michael's attorney responded?" I asked, already imagining his reaction to this unexpected setback. "They've requested a private meeting with the judge, which was promptly denied. I believe they're scrambling to adjust their strategy." Marcus sounded satisfied, the way attorneys do when outmaneuvering aggressive opposition. "In the meantime, you should proceed with business development for Phoenix Capital as aggressively as possible. The temporary orders effectively create a protective bubble around your operations." After hanging up with Marcus, I immediately called Olivia to share the news, finding her already awake and working on Phoenix Capital's marketing materials. "The universe is delivering some well-deserved karma," she declared when I explained the judge's ruling. "And speaking of good news, you've received 17 emails overnight from symposium attendees seeking meetings. Your keynote definitely made an impression." The day unfolded in a whirlwind of business development activities. By noon, I had confirmed meetings with 5 potential clients, finalized the consulting agreement with Lancaster Group, and begun interviewing candidates for Phoenix Capital's first staff positions. The momentum was exhilarating after years of suppressing my professional ambitions. Around 2 o'clock, Crystal called with unexpected information. "I thought you should know. Michael has withdrawn as CEO from the Richardson Fund project." The Richardson Fund was a major philanthropic initiative focused on inner-city financial education, one that Pearson Dynamics had been spearheading for months. He's citing personal commitments that prevent him from giving the project adequate attention. This was surprising. The Richardson Fund had been Michael's pet project, a prestigious appointment that enhanced both his personal brand and Pearson Dynamics' reputation for corporate social responsibility. "That's not like Michael," I observed. "He's never withdrawn from high-profile commitments, regardless of personal circumstances." "My sources at Pearson say he's been canceling other engagements too. Board meetings, client dinners, even the quarterly strategy retreat next week." Crystal's voice held the careful neutrality of someone delivering significant intelligence. "Apparently he's been closeted with his legal team and financial advisors almost constantly since the symposium." After we hung up, I pondered this information while reviewing applications for Phoenix Capital's analyst positions. Michael withdrawing from professional commitments was completely out of character. Throughout our marriage, he had prioritized work above everything, including our relationship. For him to suddenly reverse that pattern suggested something significant was happening behind the scenes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Opening it, I was surprised to find a message from Troy, Olivia's brother, who had handled the Porsche sale. "Ginny? Thought you should know. Michael came by the dealership this morning asking detailed questions about the Porsche transaction." Very interested in the exact sale price and timing. Just a heads up. I forwarded the text to Marcus, who responded almost immediately. Interesting. He should have received that information through Discovery. Suggests he's investigating independently. Will notify Judge Harriman of potential harassment of third-party witnesses. The pieces were beginning to form a puzzling pattern. Michael withdrawing from professional commitments, investigating the Porsche sale outside proper legal channels, meeting continuously with his legal and financial teams. Something wasn't adding up. That evening, as Olivia and I were celebrating the successful first week of Phoenix Capital over takeout in her apartment, my phone rang with a call from Gracie, Michael's executive assistant. "Ginny? I'm sorry to call so late," she began, her voice hushed as if she were somewhere she might be overheard. "I don't know if this means anything, but Michael has been acting strangely since the symposium." "Strange how?" I asked, putting the call on speaker so Olivia could hear. "He's canceled all his appointments for the next 2 weeks. He's had the financial team pulling records going back years. And yesterday, he asked me to compile a complete list of every investment Pearson made based on your suggestions, client, events you attended, people you introduced him to, conversations where you provided insight." I exchanged a bewildered look with Olivia. "That's unexpected. Did he say why?" "No, but he seemed almost frantic. I've never seen him like this, not even during the financial crisis." After thanking Gracie for the information, I sat in contemplative silence, trying to make sense of Michael's behavior. "What do you think it means?" Olivia finally asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But something has him rattled, something beyond our divorce or Phoenix Capital's launch." The mystery deepened the following day when Jacob Harris called with news from Lancaster Group's financial intelligence network. "Our analysts have picked up unusual trading patterns in Pearson Dynamics stock," he reported. "Several major shareholders have been quietly reducing their positions over the past 48 hours. Selling Pearson stock? Why?" This was alarming news. Pearson Dynamics had been a stable performer for years, rarely experiencing significant shareholder movement. "Unclear," Jacob replied. "But it coincides with rumors that Michael has been seeking emergency capital infusions for certain Pearson holdings. Nothing confirmed, but our market intelligence team is monitoring closely." I thanked Jacob for the information, then immediately called Marcus to share these developments. This adds context to his aggressive move to freeze Phoenix Capital's assets, Marcus observed thoughtfully. "If Pearson Dynamics is experiencing financial difficulties, Michael may be concerned about asset division in the divorce. The expedited discovery could expose vulnerabilities he's been concealing. Should we be concerned about the Porsche proceeds?" I asked, suddenly worried that Michael's financial issues might somehow threaten Phoenix Capital's funding. "No, those funds are protected by the judge's order, but this does suggest we should accelerate our timeline for financial disclosure from Michael's side. I'll file a motion this afternoon." The situation grew more intriguing when Crystal called later that day with what she described as confidential but reliable information about Pearson Dynamics. "The Nakamura deal was bigger than anyone realized," she explained. Apparently, Michael had leveraged significant company assets on the assumption it would close successfully. When Lancaster outbid them, it created a cascading liquidity problem that he's been hiding from the board. The timing suddenly clicked into place. Our anniversary dinner, I realized. He wasn't celebrating a successful closing. He was hiding from the fallout of a catastrophic failure. Exactly. And now with the divorce proceedings shining a spotlight on Pearson's finances, he can't keep it hidden much longer. I spent the next few hours reviewing everything I knew about Pearson Dynamics' financial structure, drawing on both my MBA education and the countless conversations I'd overheard during business dinners at our home. Michael had always been proud of his innovative approach to leveraging company assets for major acquisitions, an approach I had privately considered excessively risky during market volatility. Had the Nakamura failure exposed structural weaknesses in Pearson's financial foundation? It would explain Michael's frantic behavior, his withdrawal from public commitments, and his desperate attempt to freeze Phoenix Capital's assets before his own financial house of cards collapsed. The irony was almost too perfect. While Michael had dismissed my financial acumen for years, it might be my understanding of his business model that now gave me the upper hand in our divorce proceedings. I called Marcus again, sharing my analysis of Pearson's potential vulnerabilities. Based on what I knew about their leveraging strategies, "This is extremely valuable insight, Ginny," he said after I'd finished explaining. "If you're correct about the structural issues, the timing of our financial discovery couldn't be better. We'll be able to establish accurate valuation of Pearson dynamics before any potential market correction affects asset division. And Phoenix Capital? Completely insulated thanks to Judge Harriman's orders. In fact, if Pearson experiences significant difficulties, it could actually enhance Phoenix Capital's position in the market. Clients might seek alternatives to traditional investment approaches, exactly the niche you're developing." That evening, as I was finalizing Phoenix Capital's first official client proposal for a promising sustainable fashion startup led by two female entrepreneurs, my phone lit up with a call from a number I'd never expected to see again. Our home landline. For a moment, I hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. After 5 rings, I finally answered. "Hello? Where are you?" Michael's voice sounded strange, tight with strain and something else I couldn't immediately identify. "I need to talk to you, not through lawyers, just us." "That's not appropriate at this stage of our proceedings," I replied carefully, mindful of Marcus's advice to avoid direct negotiations. "If you have something to discuss, it should go through proper channels." "Damn it, Ginny, this isn't about the divorce." The unusual edge in his voice sharpened. "This is about—" He stopped abruptly. "I need 15 minutes. Face to face, please." The please caught me off guard. In 12 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times Michael had genuinely pleaded for anything. "Why?" I asked simply. There was a long pause, then, "Because you were right. About everything. About Pearson's leveraging strategy. About the risks I've been taking. About a lot of things." I absorbed this unexpected admission in silence, trying to determine if it was genuine contrition or strategic maneuvering. "If this is about financial disclosure, Marcus has already—" "It's not about the legal proceedings," he interrupted. "It's about preventing a complete disaster, the kind that affects more than just us. Employees, clients, investors. I need your insight." Just once more, something in his tone, a vulnerability I'd never heard before, made me reconsider my automatic refusal. Michael Reynolds did not admit weakness or ask for help. For him to do so now suggested a truly desperate situation. "Tomorrow morning," I decided. "The cafe at the Westbrook Hotel, 8 a.m. 15 minutes, as you said." "Thank you," he replied, genuine relief evident in his voice. "And Ginny, come alone. No lawyers, no Lancaster representatives, just you." After he hung up, I sat motionless, contemplating this unexpected development. Michael acknowledging I was right about anything, let alone everything, was unprecedented. Something significant had changed since the symposium, something beyond our divorce or Phoenix Capital's launch. I called Marcus to inform him of the meeting, despite Michael's request for secrecy. "This is highly irregular," Marcus warned. "Meeting without counsel present could compromise our position." "I understand the risks," I assured him, "but I'm curious about what's happening with Pearson Dynamics. This could provide valuable intelligence for our proceedings. If you insist on going, keep it brief and reveal nothing about Phoenix Capital's operations or our legal strategy. And Ginny—" His tone grew more serious. "Be careful. Desperation makes people unpredictable, even someone as controlled as Michael." Reynolds. After hanging up, I received a text from Crystal. "Urgent news. Pearson Dynamics board calling emergency meeting tomorrow afternoon. Highly unusual. Watch yourself with Michael. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture I hadn't anticipated when I sold the Porsche to fund Phoenix Capital. Michael wasn't just fighting our divorce or my professional emergence. He was battling for his corporate survival. The irony was almost too perfect. While I had been building Phoenix Capital from the ground up, Michael's carefully constructed business empire was potentially crumbling due to exactly the kind of reckless leveraging I had cautioned against during our marriage. As I prepared for bed in Olivia's guest room, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow's meeting would reveal. Michael had always been a masterful strategist. Was this genuine desperation or another calculated move in our ongoing chess match? Either way, I would approach our meeting with the same clear-eyed pragmatism that had guided Phoenix Capital's creation. Michael might have finally recognized my financial acumen, but that didn't mean I would allow him to use it at my expense. The woman who had once subordinated her ambitions to his convenience no longer existed. In her place stood the founder of Phoenix Capital, ready to listen, but no longer willing to sacrifice her interests for his benefit. Sleep eluded me that night despite my exhaustion. I lay awake in Olivia's guest room, staring at the ceiling as I mentally prepared for my meeting with Michael. What could be so dire that he would reach out directly, bypassing our attorneys and admitting he needed my help? The Michael I knew would rather suffer in silence than acknowledge any weakness, particularly to me. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep altogether and moved to the living room with my laptop. If I was going to meet Michael in 5 hours, I wanted to be fully informed. About Pearson Dynamics' current situation, I searched financial news sites, investment forums, and business blogs for any hints of trouble. The public information revealed nothing alarming. Stock prices had dipped slightly, but not dramatically, and there were no official announcements of restructuring or leadership changes. Whatever was happening remained behind closed doors for now. I shifted my focus to what I personally knew about Pearson's financial structure, particularly their approach to leveraging assets for major acquisitions. Michael had always favored an aggressive strategy, using existing client accounts as collateral for expansion moves. It was legally permissible, but ethically questionable, and extremely risky if a major deal fell through. Like the Nakamura deal, a theory began forming in my mind, one that connected Michael's increasingly erratic behavior, the emergency board meeting, and his desperate outreach to me. I opened a new document and began mapping out possible scenarios, drawing on my MBA, training, and years of overhearing Michael's business discussions. By dawn, I had developed a plausible hypothesis about Pearson Dynamics' current crisis, one that would explain why Michael suddenly valued my financial insight after years of dismissing. Yet I showered and dressed with particular care, choosing a sleek charcoal suit that conveyed authority without flashiness. Today wasn't about impressing Michael, but about meeting him as an equal, professionally, intellectually, and strategically. Olivia emerged from her bedroom as I was applying the finishing touches to my makeup. "You look ready for battle," she observed, yawning as she headed for the coffee maker. "More like a high-stakes negotiation," I replied, checking my reflection one final time. Michael doesn't ask for help unless he's truly desperate, which means he'll be vulnerable, but also potentially unpredictable. "Be careful," Olivia cautioned, echoing Marcus's warning from the previous evening. Michael's never handled vulnerability well, and he's had his entire world upended in the span of a week. His marriage, his car, his company. "I'll be careful," I promised, gathering my portfolio and phone. "This isn't about rekindling anything. It's about understanding what's happening with Pearson Dynamics before it potentially impacts our divorce proceedings." "And if he's genuinely in trouble?" Olivia asked, studying me over the rim of her coffee mug. "What then?" I paused at the door, considering the question seriously. "Then I'll listen and decide based on the facts, not emotions or history." The Westbrook Hotel was a discreet establishment favored by business executives for confidential meetings, neutral, territory where Michael and I were unlikely to encounter mutual acquaintances. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table in the cafe that offered privacy without isolation. At precisely 8 a.m., Michael walked in. The change in him since the symposium was subtle, but noticeable to someone who had studied his expressions for 12 years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally impeccable suit showed signs of hasty preparation. He scanned the cafe, his gaze settling on me with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Relief, perhaps, or resignation. "Thank you for coming," he said as he took the seat across from me. His voice held none of its usual commanding confidence. 15 minutes, I reminded him, placing my phone on the table with its timer visible. "That's what we agreed to." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I'll get straight to the point. Pearson Dynamics is facing a liquidity crisis following the Nakamura failure. The leveraging strategy I've used for expansion has created a vulnerability that could trigger a cascading collapse if certain conditions align." I maintained a neutral expression, though inwardly I was startled by his bluntness. "Why tell me? This? It seems like information that should remain confidential within Pearson, because you warned me about this exact scenario 3 years ago, at the Harrington dinner." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd rarely seen from him. "Remember? You said my approach to collateralizing client accounts for acquisition leverage was creating a house of cards." The memory surfaced immediately. A conversation after one of Michael's business dinners where I'd cautiously suggested his leveraging strategy seemed dangerously exposed to market fluctuations. He'd dismissed my concerns with patronizing amusement, assuring me that, "This is how modern finance works, babe." "I remember," I acknowledged. "But I still don't understand why you're telling me now. Our attorneys handle disclosure of financial matters relevant to our divorce?" Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. "This isn't about the divorce, Ginny. It's about preventing a market event that could hurt thousands of people. Pearson employees, clients, investors. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss emergency measures, including a potential sale, to stabilize the company." "And what does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I was beginning to see where this was headed. "I need your analysis," he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. "Your understanding of our leveraging structure and its vulnerabilities. Your perspective on which stabilization approach would be most effective." He hesitated, then added what must have been enormously painful for him to acknowledge. "You were right all along about the risks. Now I need your insight to mitigate them." For a moment I sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of this reversal. After years of dismissing my financial acumen, Michael was now seeking it desperately. The vindication was profound, but so was the complexity of the situation he described. "What you're asking for is consulting work," I said finally, my tone deliberately professional. "Financial advisory services of exactly the kind Phoenix Capital provides." His expression tightened at the mention of my firm, but he nodded reluctantly. "Yes. And you understand that any consultation would need to be properly documented with appropriate confidentiality agreements and compensation?" "Ginny, there's always time for proper business procedures, Michael," I interrupted firmly. "Especially in crisis situations. That's another thing I tried to tell you over the years." He exhaled sharply, frustration warring with desperation. "Fine, whatever documentation you need, but it has to happen quickly. The board meets at 2. I checked the timer on my phone. 3 minutes remaining in our agreed 15. I'll need complete access to Pearson's current financial structure, the specific leveraging arrangements for the Nakamura deal, and the board's proposed stabilization options." I spoke briskly, establishing professional parameters. "I'll also need written acknowledgement that this consultation doesn't constitute any waiver of rights or positions in our ongoing divorce proceedings." Michael nodded, relief washing over his features. "Agreed to all conditions. I can have the documents delivered to you within the hour." "Have them sent to Phoenix Capital's office," I directed, providing the address. I'll review them there and provide my analysis by noon. As I stood to leave, Michael remained seated, looking up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of regret and something that might almost have been respect. "Ginny," he said softly, "I should have listened to you years ago. About the leveraging strategy, about your career, about a lot of things." The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and strangely weightless after years of accumulated resentment. I considered several responses, ultimately settling on the simplest truth. Yes, you should have. I left the cafe with my head high, emotions churning beneath my composed exterior. The meeting had confirmed my suspicions about Pearson Dynamics, vulnerabilities while revealing something equally significant: Michael's recognition, however belated, of my financial expertise. Outside the hotel, I called Marcus immediately, explaining the situation and Michael's request for consultation. "This is highly unusual," Marcus observed, professional caution evident in his tone, "but potentially advantageous if properly documented. I'll have contracts drafted immediately, consultation agreement, confidentiality provisions, and explicit protection of your divorce position." "Thank you. I'll need them before I begin reviewing Pearson's financial data." "Ginny," Marcus's voice grew more serious, "are you certain you want to help him? From a purely strategic perspective, allowing Pearson Dynamics to experience this crisis without your intervention might strengthen our position in the divorce proceedings." It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly since Michael's call the previous evening. Would it be more advantageous to let his company suffer the consequences of the very arrogance I was now escaping? "I'm not doing this for Michael," I explained after a thoughtful pause. "I'm doing it for the employees and clients who would be affected by a Pearson collapse. And frankly, I'm doing it for Phoenix Capital. Successfully consulting on a crisis of this magnitude would establish my firm's credentials more effectively than any marketing campaign." Marcus chuckled appreciatively, turning adversity into opportunity. "Well played." I arrived at Phoenix Capital's office to find Olivia already there, concern etched on her face. "What happened with Michael? You've been unusually quiet since the meeting." I briefed her on the situation with Pearson Dynamics and my agreement to provide crisis consultation, watching her expression shift from worry to amazement. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Michael, the man who's been dismissing your financial insights for 12 years, is now desperately seeking them to save his company? Ironic, isn't it?" I acknowledged, settling behind my desk to prepare for the impending document delivery. The ultimate vindication would be saving Pearson from the very crisis I warned him about. "Assuming you want to save it," Olivia noted, pointedly. "You're under no obligation to rescue Michael from his own bad decisions." I considered her words carefully. The truth was more complicated than simple revenge or vindication. Despite everything, I didn't wish to see a company employing hundreds of people collapse due to leadership mistakes. And professionally, successfully, advising on Pearson's crisis would establish Phoenix Capital as a serious player in the financial advisory space. "This isn't about saving Michael," I explained. "It's about demonstrating exactly what he's been dismissing all these years: my capability to analyze complex financial structures and develop effective solutions. Phoenix Capital's entire business model is based on recognizing undervalued assets and potential. If I can identify a viable path forward for Pearson Dynamics, it proves our methodology works." Olivia studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Using Michael's crisis to validate your business approach. That's either brilliant strategy or remarkable forgiveness." "Strategy," I confirmed without hesitation, though not against Michael. Personally, against the systemic undervaluation of women's financial acumen that he represents. At 9:30, a courier arrived with sealed document cases bearing Pearson Dynamics logo and explicit confidentiality warnings. Simultaneously, Marcus's assistant delivered the consultation agreements he had promised. I signed the legal documents first, ensuring that my position in the divorce proceedings was protected regardless of the outcome of my consultation. Then, with Olivia handling incoming calls and visitors to maintain my focus, I opened the Pearson documents and began my analysis. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions about Michael's leveraging strategy. The Nakamura deal had been positioned as the cornerstone of an ambitious expansion plan, with multiple client accounts and company assets collateralized against its successful completion. When Lancaster Group outbid Pearson, the entire structure became precarious, creating potential cascade effects that could trigger covenant violations across multiple financing arrangements. The board's proposed solutions, primarily seeking emergency, capital infusion from outside investors, or selling controlling interest to a larger firm, address the symptoms but not the fundamental structural issue. They were short-term patches for a system that required comprehensive redesign. For 2 hours, I immersed myself in Pearson's financial architecture, mapping vulnerabilities and potential stabilization approaches. The solution that gradually emerged wasn't what Michael or the board would want to hear, but it was the only one that addressed the core problem rather than its manifestations. At 11:45, I called Michael directly. "I've reviewed the documents," I informed him without preamble. "The situation is as serious as you indicated, but the board's proposed solutions are inadequate. They treat symptoms while ignoring the disease. What do you recommend?" His voice was tense but attentive in a way it had never been when I'd offered financial observations during our marriage. "A complete restructuring of Pearson's leveraging approach, beginning with the immediate unwinding of cross-collateralized positions that create cascade risk. It will require selling certain non-core assets and temporarily reducing shareholder returns, but it addresses the structural vulnerability rather than simply postponing collapse." There was a long silence on the line. "The board won't like it," he finally said, "especially the dividend reduction." "No doubt," I agreed. "But they'll like bankruptcy even less. I'm sending my complete analysis now, including implementation, steps, and projected timelines. The key is transparency with major stakeholders. Attempting to conceal the restructuring will only trigger the market panic you're trying to avoid." "Transparency has never been Pearson's strong suit," Michael noted with unexpected self-awareness. "Perhaps that's part of the problem," I suggested, keeping my tone professional despite the personal implications. "Stability built on obfuscation is inherently fragile." As we concluded the call, Michael cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ginny, thank you for doing this despite everything. Phoenix Capital is fortunate to have you as its founder." The acknowledgement, so long withheld during our marriage, landed with surprising weight. "It's what we do," I replied simply. "Identify undervalued assets and unlock their potential." After sending my analysis to Michael, I sat alone in my office, a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Professional satisfaction at having successfully analyzed a complex financial crisis. Vindication that Michael had finally recognized capabilities he'd dismissed for years, and an unexpected sense of closure regarding our marriage. In helping Pearson Dynamics navigate its crisis, I had demonstrated more conclusively than any argument could have that Michael had been wrong to dismiss my financial acumen. The very expertise he had discouraged me from developing had now become his company's potential salvation. The Porsche sale that had initially seemed like an act of rebellion had set in motion a chain of events leading to this moment of perfect clarity. By funding Phoenix Capital, it had created the very entity through which I could now demonstrate my value to the financial world, including to the man who had failed to see it for 12 years. I spent the remainder of the afternoon handling Phoenix Capital's growing client inquiries, deliberately focusing on business development, rather than wondering about Pearson Dynamics' board meeting. Whatever decision they made regarding my recommendations was now in Michael's hands. My responsibility had ended with delivering the analysis. At precisely 5:30 p.m., my phone rang with Michael's number. The board approved your restructuring plan, he announced without preamble. It wasn't unanimous, but the majority recognized it as the only viable long-term solution. That's encouraging, I replied, maintaining professional detachment despite my curiosity. Will you be leading the implementation? There was a pause before Michael answered. No. The board has requested that I step down as CEO during the restructuring process. They feel new leadership would better facilitate the transparency requirements you outlined. The news was surprising but not entirely unexpected. Michael's leadership style had always emphasized achievement over process, results over methodology. A restructuring that required systematic unwinding of complex leveraging arrangements would demand patience and attention to detail that weren't his natural strengths. I see, I said carefully. And their choice for interim leadership? That's actually why I'm calling. Michael's voice took on an odd quality, hesitant yet determined. The board has authorized me to approach you with an offer. They want Phoenix Capital to oversee the restructuring process, with you personally serving as special advisor to the interim CEO. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Me? The board wants me? Your analysis impressed them, particularly the way you identified structural vulnerabilities that our own financial team had overlooked. They believe your outsider perspective combined with your understanding of Pearson's operations makes you uniquely qualified. The irony was almost too perfect. After years of dismissing my financial insights, Michael's board now saw them as the company's potential salvation. And you? I asked, genuinely curious about his position. Do you support this proposal? Another pause, longer this time. Yes, he finally admitted. Your analysis was exceptional. You saw connections and risks that I missed, despite having all the same information at my disposal. Pearson Dynamics needs exactly the kind of clear-eyed evaluation Phoenix Capital specializes in. The acknowledgement, so long withheld during our marriage, should have felt triumphant. Instead, it left me with a complicated mixture of vindication and sadness for what might have been if Michael had recognized my capabilities years earlier. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I replied, keeping my tone businesslike. The engagement would need to be structured to avoid any conflicts of interest, particularly given our ongoing divorce proceedings. Of course, Michael agreed quickly. The board is prepared to offer very favorable terms. They understand the unusual circumstances. After we ended the call, I sat in stunned silence, contemplating this unexpected development. Phoenix Capital had gone from concept to being courted by a major financial firm in just over a week. My professional judgment, so long dismissed by Michael, was now being sought at the highest levels of his company. I called Marcus immediately to discuss the legal implications of accepting such an engagement during divorce proceedings. It's unusual, but not unprecedented, he advised after careful consideration. We would need extremely clear boundaries between the consulting relationship and divorce negotiations. No discussions of personal matters during business meetings, complete separation of compensation from marital asset considerations, and detailed documentation of all services provided. And strategically, I pressed. Does this help or hurt our position? Potentially helps, Marcus replied thoughtfully. It establishes your professional value in concrete terms that would be difficult for Michael's counsel to dispute. It also demonstrates good faith on your part, a willingness to contribute constructively despite personal differences. Next, I called Jacob Harris at Lancaster Group to ensure our consulting agreement wouldn't be compromised by working with Pearson Dynamics. Actually, this could be advantageous for all parties, Jacob suggested after I explained the situation. Lancaster's interest in Nakamura wasn't to damage Pearson, merely to secure a valuable acquisition. A stable Pearson Dynamics benefits the entire financial ecosystem, including Lancaster. By the time Olivia arrived with dinner, we'd taken to working late at the Phoenix Capital office. I had gathered enough legal and strategic input to make an informed decision. They want you to save the company, she marveled, shaking her head as she unpacked containers of Thai food. The ultimate vindication. It's not about vindication, I corrected, though part of me acknowledged the satisfaction of the reversal. It's a significant opportunity for Phoenix Capital to demonstrate our capabilities on a large scale. The restructuring would establish our firm as a serious player in financial advisory. Plus, Olivia added with a hint of mischief, you'd be Michael's boss, essentially. I laughed despite myself. Technically, I'd be advising the interim CEO, not directing Michael, though he would be implementing recommendations from the firm he once dismissed as unnecessary. Poetic justice, Olivia declared, raising her water glass and a mock toast to the car that funded the company that saved the company. The following morning, I scheduled a formal meeting with Pearson Dynamics Board to discuss the potential advisory relationship. The session would take place at Phoenix Capital's office, a deliberate choice that established the power dynamic from the outset. They were coming to me, not vice versa. I arrived early to prepare, reviewing the consultation proposal Marcus had drafted overnight. The terms were appropriately professional, with clear boundaries between business engagement and personal matters. Phoenix Capital would oversee Pearson's restructuring for a substantial fee, plus performance incentives tied to successful implementation milestones. At precisely 10 a.m., the Pearson contingent arrived, 3 board members, their legal counsel, and Michael, looking uncomfortable in the unfamiliar role of deposed CEO. I greeted them with professional courtesy, showing no sign of the complex emotions swirling beneath my composed exterior. Thank you for coming, I began once everyone was seated in Phoenix Capital's modest conference room. I understand the board is interested in engaging our firm to oversee Pearson Dynamics' restructuring process. That's correct, Mrs. Reynolds, the board chairman replied formally. Your analysis of our current situation was remarkably insightful. We believe Phoenix Capital's fresh perspective could be invaluable during this transition period. Ms. Reynolds, I corrected gently but firmly, or Ginny professionally, and while I appreciate the board's confidence, I want to ensure everyone understands that this would be a business engagement only, completely separate from personal matters. My gaze shifted briefly to Michael, who nodded almost imperceptibly, acknowledging the boundary. Of course, the chairman agreed. Our interest is solely in your financial expertise. The personal situation between you and Michael is irrelevant to this discussion. For the next hour, we negotiated the specifics of the advisory relationship: scope, duration, compensation, and reporting structure. Throughout the discussion, Michael remained uncharacteristically quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, about operational details. There's one additional condition, I stated as the meeting neared its conclusion. Complete transparency regarding Pearson's financial position, both internally with employees and externally with major stakeholders. Phoenix Capital won't be associated with any attempt to obscure or minimize the restructuring challenges. The board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with this requirement. Transparency had never been Pearson's strong suit, as Michael himself had acknowledged. Full transparency could trigger market reactions that worsen our position, one board member objected. Partial transparency has already created this crisis, I countered firmly. The market can handle difficult truths presented with clear remediation plans. What it cannot tolerate is discovering those truths accidentally, which inevitably happens when companies attempt to conceal structural problems. To my surprise, Michael spoke up in support of my position. Ginny's right. Our traditional approach of managing information tightly has contributed to the current situation. If we're committed to meaningful restructuring, transparency must be part of that process. The board chairman sighed, reluctantly conceding the point. Very well. Full transparency will be part of the engagement parameters. As the meeting concluded, with handshakes and promises of formal documentation, Michael lingered behind while the other Pearson representatives departed. May I have a moment? he asked, his tone carefully neutral. I glanced at my watch, establishing a subtle time boundary. Briefly, I have another meeting in 15 minutes. Once we were alone in the conference room, Michael seemed suddenly at a loss for words, a rare occurrence for someone usually so verbally confident. I want to apologize, he finally said, the words clearly difficult for him, not just for the anniversary dinner, but for years of not seeing what was right in front of me. I waited silently, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology. When I received your analysis yesterday, he continued, it was like seeing a completely different person emerge from someone I thought I knew intimately. The clarity, the precision, the strategic foresight. It was exceptional, Ginny. And it made me realize how much I've missed by dismissing your perspective all these years. The acknowledgement, so long withheld, landed with unexpected weight. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine an alternate timeline where Michael had recognized my capabilities years ago, where we had built something meaningful together as true partners rather than as success story and supportive spouse. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. It means something to hear it, even now. Is there any chance? He began, then stopped, reformulating his question. The divorce proceedings, are they definitive? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken history and possibilities. I considered it seriously, giving his inquiry the thoughtful reflection it deserved. Yes, I said finally, my voice gentle but resolute. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned, Michael. Too many anniversaries missed, too many dreams deferred, too many capabilities dismissed. Phoenix Capital exists because you consistently undervalued what I could contribute. That fundamental pattern doesn't change with one moment of crisis-induced recognition. He nodded slowly, accepting the finality of my decision with surprising grace. I understand. For what it's worth, I respect what you've built here. Phoenix Capital is impressive, as are you. We'll work together professionally to stabilize Pearson Dynamics, I assured him, steering the conversation back to safer ground. Phoenix Capital is committed to successful restructuring that protects employees and stakeholders. And after that, he asked, when the restructuring is complete and the divorce finalized? I allowed myself a small smile. After that, we'll be what we perhaps should have been from the beginning. Professional colleagues with separate lives, observing appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. As Michael left, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected when I first sold the Porsche, but something quieter and more profound. In helping save Pearson Dynamics, I wasn't rescuing Michael but demonstrating conclusively that my capabilities had always been real, always been valuable, always been worthy of recognition. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of activity, finalizing the Pearson Advisory Agreement, briefing Phoenix Capital's small but growing team on the engagement, and continuing discussions with potential clients who had approached us following the Women in Finance Symposium. That evening, as Olivia and I celebrated the Pearson contract with a quiet dinner at her apartment, she studied me with curious assessment. You seem different, she observed, more at peace somehow. I expected you to be gloating about Michael having to come to you for help, but instead you seem almost compassionate. I considered her observation, searching for the right words to explain my complicated emotions. It's not compassion exactly, I clarified. It's the realization that this was never about Michael specifically, but about what he represented, the systematic devaluation of women's capabilities in finance and beyond. Saving Pearson Dynamics isn't about helping him personally. It's about demonstrating conclusively that the perspectives he dismissed are precisely what the industry needs. Using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, Olivia suggested. More, like using my own tools to build something better, I corrected. Phoenix Capital isn't defined by opposition to traditional finance, but by recognition of overlooked value. whether in women entrepreneurs or restructuring opportunities. My phone buzzed with an email notification, the formal advisory agreement, from Pearson Dynamics, ready for signature. The compensation terms were even more favorable than we'd negotiated that morning, with additional performance incentives for successful restructuring milestones. "They really need you," Olivia noted, reading over my shoulder. "They need what I've always had to offer," I amended. "The capacity to see connections others miss and value what others dismiss." It just took selling Michael's Porsche for them to finally notice. As I signed the agreement, formally establishing Phoenix Capital as Pearson Dynamics' restructuring advisor, I felt the strange symmetry of the situation. The car that Michael had valued above our anniversary dinner had funded the business that would now save his company from the very risks I had warned him about years ago. Sometimes the path to recognition requires dramatic action, like selling a beloved Porsche to fund a dream business. And sometimes that dream business becomes exactly what's needed to solve problems created by those who dismissed it as unnecessary in the first place. The next few weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of activity as Phoenix Capital began implementing Pearson Dynamics' restructuring plan. I assembled a small but highly effective team, bringing on 2 experienced financial analysts and a restructuring specialist to manage the day-to-day aspects of the engagement while I focused on strategic direction and stakeholder communication. Michael, despite his official removal as CEO, remained involved as a board member and institutional knowledge resource. Our interactions maintained strict professional boundaries, focused exclusively on business matters with no reference to our personal history or ongoing divorce proceedings. 3 weeks into the restructuring process, we scheduled a comprehensive presentation for Pearson's major investors and stakeholders, the transparency initiative I had insisted upon as a condition of our engagement. The event would take place at Pearson headquarters, with joint presentations from Phoenix Capital and Pearson's interim leadership team. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early to review the final slides and coordinate with Pearson's communications department. As I walked through the familiar marble lobby, a space I had visited countless times as Michael's wife but never as a professional advisor, I experienced a strange sense of déjà vu, mixed with profound difference. Same building, same people greeting me, but an entirely transformed context. "Ms. Reynolds," the receptionist welcomed me with newfound respect. "The team is gathered in the executive conference room. Mr. Reynolds asked if you could join them for a pre-briefing before the stakeholders arrive." I took the executive elevator to the top floor, mentally reviewing key points from our presentation. The restructuring plan was progressing well, with initial stabilization measures already improving Pearson's liquidity position. Today's presentation would outline the longer-term structural changes needed to prevent similar crises in the future. The executive conference room buzzed with nervous energy as I entered. Pearson's interim CEO, several board members, and the communications team reviewing talking points and fielding last-minute questions. Michael stood slightly apart, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows with an expression of uncharacteristic contemplation. "Ginny," the interim CEO greeted me warmly. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the Q&A strategy for today's session, particularly regarding Michael's role in the leveraging decisions that created the current situation," clarified one board member, his tone carrying subtle accusation. I glanced at Michael, who continued staring out the window without responding to the implied criticism. This was the aspect of transparency he was struggling with most, acknowledging publicly that his leadership decisions had contributed to Pearson's vulnerabilities. "Our communication strategy remains consistent," I stated firmly. "Complete transparency about past decisions and current remediation without assigning individual blame. This isn't about identifying villains, but about demonstrating systemic corrections." The interim CEO nodded gratefully. "Exactly right. This presentation needs to focus on solutions, not scapegoating." As the team dispersed to complete final preparations, Michael approached me, his expression unreadable. "A moment?" he requested quietly. I checked my watch. "Briefly, the stakeholders will be arriving in 30 minutes. He led me to a small side office, closing the door to ensure privacy. "I wanted to thank you," he began awkwardly, "for the way you've handled this situation. You could have used the presentation to highlight my mistakes, but instead, you've kept the focus on structural solutions. Phoenix Capital's reputation is built on solving problems, not assigning blame," I replied professionally. "Personalizing the crisis wouldn't serve anyone's interests, including mine." Michael nodded, accepting this explanation. "Still, I appreciate it." He hesitated, then continued with evident difficulty. "The board has made a decision about permanent leadership once the restructuring is complete. They've asked me to step down permanently." Though not entirely surprising, the news was significant. Michael had built Pearson Dynamics from the ground up, shaping its culture and strategy through sheer force of will. His permanent removal represented the end of an era. "I'm sorry," said, meaning it despite our complicated history. "I know how much Pearson means to you." "It's the right decision," he acknowledged with unexpected self-awareness. "The company needs leadership that values different perspectives and collaborative approaches. That's never been my strong suit, as you know better than anyone." An uncomfortable silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken history and mutual recognition of patterns too deeply established to change. "You're building something remarkable with Phoenix Capital," Michael finally said, his tone carrying genuine respect. "The team, the methodology, the results you're already showing. It's impressive, Ginny. You've accomplished more in a month than most advisory firms do in their first year." The compliment, delivered without qualification or condescension, felt surreal after years of hearing my capabilities subtly minimized. "Thank you," I replied simply. It helps to have been preparing for it, consciously or unconsciously, for the past decade. Something flickered in Michael's expression. Regret, perhaps, or the painful recognition of opportunities missed through his own blindness. "I should have seen it," he admitted quietly. "Your potential, your capabilities, they were always there. I just couldn't see past my own ego to recognize them." This moment, Michael at his most vulnerable, finally acknowledging the fundamental flaw in how he had perceived me, should have felt triumphant. Instead, it carried a bittersweet quality, arriving too late to salvage what we had once been to each other. "We should join the others," I said gently, redirecting us to the professional task at hand. "The stakeholders will be arriving soon." The presentation itself unfolded with precision and transparency. Phoenix Capital's analysis was presented clearly, the restructuring plan outlined in comprehensive detail, and the necessary changes to Pearson's leveraging strategy explained without finger-pointing or blame assignment. When the Q&A session began, however, the focus inevitably turned to leadership accountability. "Mr. Reynolds," one major shareholder addressed Michael directly, "given that these high-risk leveraging strategies were implemented under your leadership, how can investors trust that Pearson has truly learned its lesson?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Michael. This was the moment of reckoning. How would he respond to this direct challenge to his leadership decisions? Michael rose slowly, approaching the podium with the confident bearing I had witnessed countless times at corporate events. But as he began speaking, I noticed something different, a humility that had never before characterized his public persona. "That's a fair question," he acknowledged, making direct eye contact with the shareholder. "The leveraging strategies that created our current vulnerability were implemented under my direction, against the advice of several colleagues who correctly identified the inherent risks." A murmur rippled through the audience at this unexpected admission. "One of those voices belonged to Ginny Reynolds," Michael continued, gesturing toward me. 3 years ago, she specifically cautioned against the cross-collateralization approach we used for acquisitions like Nakamura. I dismissed her concerns, a mistake that nearly cost this company its future. The revelation hung in the air, creating a moment of perfect clarity for everyone present. Michael Reynolds, legendary for his unwavering confidence, was publicly acknowledging a fundamental misjudgment. This is why the board's decision to bring in Phoenix Capital as restructuring advisor is so critical, he concluded. It represents not just financial expertise, but a willingness to value perspectives that challenge conventional thinking, something my leadership often failed to do. As Michael returned to his seat, I caught his eye briefly, acknowledging the significance of what he had just done. In that public admission, he had reached the peak moment of his character arc, recognizing and taking responsibility for the fundamental flaw that had defined both his leadership style and our marriage. The remainder of the Q&A session proceeded smoothly, with investors expressing cautious support for the restructuring plan and Phoenix Capital's oversight role. By the time the presentation concluded, Pearson Dynamics stock had stabilized, indicating the market's tentative approval of our transparency initiative. As the stakeholders filed out, Michael approached me one final time. "Dinner tonight?" he asked quietly. "To discuss next steps for the restructuring?" I shook my head gently but firmly. "I think we've covered everything necessary in the presentation. My team will follow up with implementation timelines tomorrow." "Of course," he accepted, disappointment flickering briefly across his features. "Professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries," I confirmed. "Phoenix Capital will continue supporting Pearson's restructuring as outlined in our agreement, but personal entanglements would only complicate the process." As I gathered my materials to leave, Michael asked one final question. "The Porsche, was it worth it? Using it to fund Phoenix Capital?" I paused, considering the unexpected query. "The Porsche was just a car, Michael. What it funded was infinitely more valuable, not just a business, but the recognition of what I'm capable of building." He nodded slowly, accepting this truth. "For what it's worth, I'd make the same trade now. The car for what you've created? No contest." As I walked away from Pearson headquarters that afternoon, I realized Michael had reached the zenith of his character development, acknowledging both his mistakes and my value with a clarity he had never shown during our marriage. It was, in many ways, the peak moment of our antagonist, recognizing too late the treasure he had failed to appreciate until it was irrevocably beyond his reach. The day after the stakeholder presentation, I arrived at Phoenix Capital's office to find an elaborate flower arrangement waiting on my desk. The card simply read, "Thank you for saving what I built while building something even better. M." I placed the flowers on the reception desk for everyone to enjoy. The gesture was thoughtful, but maintaining appropriate boundaries remained, essential for both Phoenix Capital's professional reputation and my own emotional clarity. Olivia arrived moments later, eyeing the flowers curiously. "From Michael?" I nodded, already focusing on the day's agenda. "A thank you for yesterday's presentation, nothing more. And the divorce proceedings? Any movement there?" "Actually, yes." I handed her the document I'd received from Marcus Blackwell the previous evening. "Michael has agreed to an uncontested settlement. Full financial disclosure, equitable asset division, and a clear acknowledgement of Phoenix Capital as my separate property." Olivia's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's unexpectedly reasonable. No fighting over the Porsche proceeds?" "None. He's acknowledged it as a legitimate business investment, not a vindictive action." I couldn't keep a hint of amazement from my voice. "Marcus says it's the most straightforward, high-net-worth divorce he's handled in 20 years. People can surprise you," Olivia observed thoughtfully. "Even Michael Reynolds." Before I could respond, Jacob Harris from Lancaster Group arrived for our scheduled meeting. As Olivia excused herself, Jacob settled into the visitor's chair with his characteristic directness. "Impressive performance at the Pearson stakeholder presentation," he began. "You've accomplished what many thought impossible, saving the company while maintaining your own firm's independence and integrity. Thank you. It's been an interesting challenge. Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. Jacob leaned forward, his expression shifting to business mode. Lancaster Group would like to expand our relationship with Phoenix Capital beyond the current consulting agreement. We're prepared to offer a substantial investment to help you scale more rapidly. The offer was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. Phoenix Capital's success with Pearson's restructuring had generated significant industry attention. Still, I hesitated, wary of compromising our independence too quickly. What kind of investment are you proposing? $20 million for a 15% non-controlling stake, Jacob replied without hesitation. You maintain majority ownership and complete operational control. We provide capital, connections, and complementary resources. The figure momentarily stole my breath. $20 million was transformative funding, the difference between gradual, organic growth and immediate expansion into a full-service financial advisory powerhouse. That's substantial, I acknowledged. May I ask why Lancaster is interested in such a significant investment? Jacob smiled appreciatively at the direct question. 3 reasons. First, Phoenix Capital's female entrepreneur focus represents a market segment Lancaster has historically underserved. Second, your Pearson restructuring has demonstrated exceptional methodology that complements our own approach. And third, his expression grew more serious. We believe the financial industry needs more firms with your ethical clarity and innovative perspective. As Jacob outlined the proposed investment structure, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past month. What had begun as a simple act of rebellion, selling Michael's prized Porsche after yet another canceled anniversary, had catalyzed a complete transformation of my professional identity and, increasingly, the financial landscape itself. I'll need to review the terms with my team and legal counsel, I told Jacob as our meeting concluded. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the potential partnership. After he departed, I sat alone in my office, contemplating this latest development. $20 million. From the sale of a $180,000 car to a multi-million-dollar valuation in just over a month, the trajectory was almost too extraordinary to comprehend. My phone buzzed with a text from Crystal at Meridian Financial. Just heard about Lancaster's offer. Call me before you sign anything. We'd like to discuss alternatives. I smiled, recognizing the beginning of a bidding war for Phoenix Capital's partnership. How quickly things had changed since that lonely anniversary dinner just weeks ago. Later that afternoon, Gracie, still Michael's executive assistant at Pearson Dynamics, called with unexpected information. Ginny, I thought you should know. Michael has decided to leave the company entirely once the restructuring is complete. He's declined the board's offer of a chairman emeritus position. The news was surprising. I had assumed Michael would maintain some connection to the company he had founded, even if not in an executive capacity. Did he say why? I asked, curious despite myself. Not officially, Gracie replied. But he's been different since the stakeholder presentation, more reflective, less Michael-like. Yesterday he spent hours going through old company records, particularly the early founding documents. That's unusual, I acknowledged, wondering what had prompted this archaeological expedition into Pearson's past. There's something else, Gracie continued, her voice lowering slightly. He's been asking about your early career, before you were married. Specifically, your time at Brookfield. Analytics. My first professional position after graduate school. Why would Michael be investigating that now? Thank you for letting me know, I told Gracie, filing away this curious information for later consideration. The mystery deepened the following day when Marcus Blackwell called with news about the divorce settlement. Michael's attorney has proposed an unusual addition to the agreement, Marcus reported. He wants to establish a scholarship fund in your name at the business school where you completed your MBA. $1 million, specifically designated for women pursuing finance careers. That's unexpected, I said, genuinely surprised by the gesture. Did they explain the motivation? Only that it represents recognition of opportunities that should have been supported earlier, Marcus replied. It's perfectly legitimate from a legal perspective, though unusual in divorce proceedings. Do you want me to accept the proposal? Yes, I decided after brief consideration. It's a meaningful initiative, whatever the motivation behind it. As the call ended, I found myself increasingly puzzled by Michael's recent actions. The uncontested divorce settlement, the graceful exit from Pearson, the scholarship fund, none aligned with the man who had dismissed my career ambitions for 12 years. That evening, as I reviewed Lancaster Group's investment proposal in Phoenix, Capital's quiet office, the mystery of Michael's transformation continued to occupy my thoughts. What had triggered this fundamental shift in his perspective? The Pearson crisis alone seemed insufficient explanation for such a comprehensive reevaluation of his attitudes. My contemplation was interrupted by a delivery courier arriving with a large manila envelope marked, "Personal, Virginia Reynolds." Inside was a single document, a yellowed newspaper clipping from 15 years ago, featuring a team of financial analysts who had won a prestigious industry competition. I was among them, fresh-faced and professionally ambitious in my first position at Brookfield Analytics. Attached was a handwritten note in Michael's distinctive script. I found this while clearing my office at Pearson. 15 years ago, before we met, I served as a judge for this competition. I remember being impressed by the team's innovative approach, particularly their analysis of overlooked market opportunities. What I failed to remember, until seeing this photograph again, was that you were part of that team. I had recognized your exceptional capabilities before I ever knew you personally, then somehow lost sight of them once you became my wife. The Scholarship Fund is a small attempt to ensure other women's talents aren't similarly overlooked. Michael. I sat motionless, absorbing the staggering revelation. Michael had actually acknowledged my financial acumen years before we met, then progressively dismissed those same capabilities as our marriage developed. The cognitive dissonance was almost too perfect an encapsulation of how professional women are often viewed, respected for their capabilities until they enter personal relationships, at which point those same abilities become somehow threatening or inconvenient. This behind-the-scenes revelation explained so much about Michael's recent behavior, the intensity of his self-recrimination, the completeness of his professional retreat, the scholarship fund that seemed to come from nowhere. He wasn't just acknowledging a mistaken business strategy. He was confronting a fundamental failure of perception that had shaped our entire relationship. I carefully folded the clipping and note, placing them in my desk drawer. This wasn't information I needed to share with anyone else. Not Olivia, not Marcus, not our professional colleagues. It was a private revelation that completed my understanding of what had truly happened in our marriage. Michael hadn't just failed to see my capabilities, he had actively unseen them, gradually erasing his initial recognition of my talents as I transitioned from professional colleague to wife. The erasure hadn't been malicious but was perhaps more devastating for its unconscious nature, a slow cultural rewiring of how he perceived my fundamental identity. As I gathered my things to leave for the evening, I felt a strange sense of clarity and closure. The Porsche sale that had catalyzed my professional rebirth hadn't just funded Phoenix Capital. It had shattered the perceptual limitations that had constrained both Michael's vision and, to some extent, my own. 2 days after receiving Michael's revelation about our pre-marriage connection, I convened Phoenix Capital's newly expanded leadership team to discuss the Lancaster Group investment offer. Olivia was present as our marketing director, along with our financial analysts, restructuring specialist, and legal counsel. Lancaster's proposal is strong, I began, displaying the terms on our conference room screen. $20 million for 15% equity with full operational independence maintained. However, we've also received preliminary interest from Meridian Financial and 2 other institutions since news of the offer leaked. A bidding war for Phoenix Capital, Olivia observed with satisfaction. Quite a change from 30 days ago, when you were selling a car to fund basic operations. The team chuckled appreciatively, the extraordinary trajectory of our firm's growth not lost on anyone present. Before we evaluate these offers, I continued, I want to clarify our long-term vision. Phoenix Capital was founded to address a specific market failure, the systematic undervaluation of women entrepreneurs and their businesses. Any investment partnership must strengthen that mission, not dilute it. The discussion that followed was thoughtful and strategic, weighing financial considerations against mission alignment. By the time we concluded 3 hours later, a clear consensus had emerged. Lancaster Group's offer provided the best combination of resources and cultural compatibility, though we would negotiate for improved terms given the competing interest. The team filed out. Olivia remained behind, studying me with curious assessment. You seem different today, more settled somehow. I considered sharing Michael's note about the competition 15 years ago, but decided against it. Some revelations belonged to private understanding rather than public narrative. I think I've finally reached clarity about the journey that brought us here, I said instead. Phoenix Capital isn't just my response to a canceled anniversary. It's something I've been building toward my entire professional life, even when I didn't recognize it. Later that afternoon, Crystal Watson from Meridian Financial arrived for our scheduled meeting about their potential counter-offre to Lancaster's investment proposal. Before we discuss terms, she began once pleasantries were exchanged, I want to share something you should know about Lancaster's interest in Phoenix Capital. I nodded, curious about this unexpected opening. I'm listening. Their acquisition of Nakamura Technologies, the deal that triggered Pearson's crisis, wasn't coincidental, Crystal explained. Lancaster had been monitoring Michael's leveraging strategy for months, deliberately calculating its vulnerabilities. They outbid Pearson specifically to trigger the liquidity crisis that forced him to step down. The revelation was startling, but not entirely surprising. The financial world operated through strategic maneuvers and carefully calculated power plays. What was unexpected was the connection to Phoenix Capital, and their investment offer to us? Part of the same long-term strategy, Crystal confirmed. They recognized your capabilities early, possibly before you even launched Phoenix Capital. Jacob Harris had been tracking your involvement in Michael's business decisions for years, noting how often your social connections yielded profitable client relationships for Pearson. I sat back, absorbing this additional layer of complexity. You're suggesting Lancaster orchestrated this entire situation? The Nakamura deal? Pearson's crisis? Even the timing of their investment offer to Phoenix Capital? Not the entire situation, Crystal clarified. They couldn't have predicted you'd sell Michael's Porsche to fund your firm, or that you'd establish Phoenix Capital with such remarkable speed and effectiveness. But once those elements were in place, they recognized an opportunity to simultaneously weaken Pearson and acquire a stake in a promising new venture led by someone whose capabilities they already respected. The strategic chess game was more intricate than I'd realized. Lancaster Group hadn't just recognized Phoenix Capital's value after the fact. They had identified my potential long before I had fully claimed it myself. Why tell me this? I asked. Crystal directly. Presumably Meridian has its own strategic interests in countering Lancaster's offer. She smiled appreciatively at my directness. Of course we do. But partnerships should be based on informed decisions. Lancaster sees Phoenix Capital as a valuable chess piece in their larger competitive strategy. Meridian sees you as a transformative force in the financial landscape, one we'd prefer to ally with rather than oppose. As Crystal outlined Meridian's counterproposal, $18 million for 12% equity, plus dedicated resources for women entrepreneur initiatives, I found myself reassessing not just the competing offers, but the entire landscape of alliances, forming around Phoenix Capital, Lancaster, Meridian, even Michael in his own complicated way. All had recognized capabilities in me that had previously been overlooked or dismissed. The question now was which alliance would best serve Phoenix Capital's mission and my own professional vision. After Crystal departed, I received an unexpected call from Troy Bennett, Lancaster's head of acquisitions, requesting an urgent meeting. Curious about this development so soon after Crystal's revelations, I agreed to see him that evening. Troy arrived looking uncharacteristically hesitant for an executive known for his aggressive acquisition strategies. I assume Crystal Watson has shared her interpretation of Lancaster's interest in Phoenix Capital, he began without preamble. She has, I acknowledged, including the suggestion that the Nakamura acquisition was deliberately designed to destabilize Pearson Dynamics. Troy nodded, accepting this disclosure. What she likely didn't share is that I opposed that strategy, precisely because it involved collateral damage to uninvolved parties, Pearson's employees, clients, and yes, even you, though none of us, anticipated your emergence as Phoenix Capital's founder. His candor was surprising, particularly given his position at Lancaster. Why tell me this now? Because alliance decisions should be based on complete information, Troy replied, echoing Crystal's earlier sentiment with uncanny similarity. Yes, Lancaster orchestrated the Nakamura situation to weaken a competitor. Yes, our investment offer to Phoenix Capital serves strategic purposes beyond simple financial returns. But that doesn't invalidate the genuine respect our firm has for what you're building. I studied him carefully, weighing his words against Crystal's warnings and my own assessment of Lancaster's motivations. And your personal position in all this? I believe Phoenix Capital represents something the financial industry desperately needs. A perspective that identifies value where traditional approaches see only risk or insignificance. Troy's expression grew more animated, revealing genuine conviction beneath his corporate exterior. That's why I've advocated internally for complete operational independence in our investment terms. Your vision should drive Phoenix Capital, not Lancaster's strategic objectives. As our conversation continued, Troy shared additional context about Lancaster's approach to the women entrepreneur market, both its historical limitations and its emerging recognition of the opportunity this underserved segment represented. By the time he departed, I had a more nuanced understanding of what alliance with Lancaster might truly entail. The following morning, I convened an emergency meeting with Phoenix Capital's leadership team to share both Crystal's revelations and Troy's subsequent clarifications. We need to make a decision about these investment offers based on complete information, I explained, outlining the complex strategic maneuvering occurring around our firm. Both Lancaster and Meridian have their own objectives beyond simple financial returns. The question is which alliance best supports Phoenix Capital's mission while preserving our operational independence. The discussion that followed was vigorous, with team members presenting compelling arguments for both potential partnerships. By midday, however, we had reached a surprising consensus, one that diverged from our previous inclination toward Lancaster's offer. We should decline both investments in their current form, our lead financial analyst proposed. Phoenix Capital's rapid success with Pearson's restructuring has demonstrated our value proposition more effectively than any theoretical business plan. We're now in a position to negotiate more favorable terms or potentially pursue alternative funding structures altogether. The suggestion resonated with everyone present, including me. What had begun as a desperate measure, selling Michael's Porsche to fund essential startup operations, had evolved into a position of genuine strategic strength. Phoenix Capital no longer needed to accept the first viable investment offer. We could shape our own destiny based on carefully considered alliances. That afternoon, I called both Jacob Harris at Lancaster and Crystal Watson at Meridian to inform them of our decision to pause investment discussions pending further internal assessment. Both expressed disappointment but also increased interest, our selectivity only enhancing Phoenix Capital's perceived value. The landscape has shifted, I explained to Olivia as we debriefed after these calls. Phoenix Capital isn't just reacting to external circumstances anymore. We're proactively determining our own direction and choosing our own alliances. From selling a car out of desperation to declining $20 million in investment because the terms aren't quite right, Olivia marveled. If you'd told me this would be our reality a month ago, I wouldn't have believed it. The true confirmation of Phoenix Capital's transformed position came the following day, when I received calls from 3 additional financial institutions expressing interest in potential partnership arrangements. Word of our declined offers had spread throughout the industry, creating a perception of Phoenix Capital as a highly selective, values-driven firm with transformative potential. By week's end, we had scheduled preliminary discussions with 7 different potential alliance partners, each offering unique combinations of financial resources, market access, and mission alignment. Phoenix Capital had evolved from a desperate entrepreneurial gamble into a coveted strategic partner with the luxury of choosing its own collaborators. As I reviewed the various partnership proposals that weekend, I couldn't help reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events triggered by Michael's canceled anniversary dinner. The Porsche sale that had initially seemed like emotional rebellion had catalyzed a sequence of professional transformations that now positioned Phoenix Capital at the center of a reconfiguring financial landscape. The most significant alliance confirmation, however, came from an unexpected source. Marcus Blackwell called Sunday evening with news about the divorce settlement. Michael has added another provision to the agreement, he reported. He's requesting that Phoenix Capital be given first right of refusal for ongoing financial advisory services to Pearson Dynamics after the current restructuring is complete. The proposal was unprecedented, Michael effectively ensuring that the company he had founded would maintain a permanent professional relationship with the firm his. Sometimes, the path to recognition requires dramatic action, like selling a beloved Porsche to fund a dream business. And sometimes that dream business becomes exactly what's needed to solve problems created by those who dismissed it as unnecessary in the first place. 1 year to the day after Michael had canceled our anniversary dinner to handle his urgent Tokyo deal, I stood at the podium of the Women in Finance Summit, delivering the keynote address to the country's financial elite. Phoenix Capital had evolved from a desperate startup funded by a car sale into one of the most respected advisory firms in the industry, with a client list that included promising ventures traditional institutions had overlooked. The past year has taught me something profound about value, I told the attentive audience. We often fail to recognize the most significant opportunities because they don't match our preconceived notions of what success should look like. In the front row sat Michael, no longer my husband, but now a business ally and reluctant champion of the very firm his dismissiveness had inadvertently created. Our divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier with the equitable settlement he'd proposed, including the scholarship fund established in my name for women pursuing finance careers. Pearson Dynamics had successfully completed its restructuring under Phoenix Capital's guidance, emerging as a more stable institution with transparent practices and diversified leadership. Michael had stepped down permanently as CEO, though Pearson maintained its advisory relationship with Phoenix Capital, as stipulated in our divorce agreement. The financial ecosystem functions most effectively when it recognizes value in all its diverse manifestations, I continued, presenting data from Phoenix Capital's market analysis. Persistent blind spots don't just harm individual entrepreneurs, they deprive our economy of essential innovations. As I concluded my speech to enthusiastic applause, I caught Michael's eye briefly. His expression carried a complex mixture of respect, regret, and something like pride. We had both, in our separate ways, arrived at a moment of recognition, acknowledging that what had emerged from our broken marriage was professionally valuable in ways neither could have anticipated. The summit's reception brought a steady stream of financial executives eager to discuss partnership opportunities with Phoenix Capital. We had recently closed our first major investment round, securing $30 million from a consortium that included Lancaster Group, Meridian Financial, and two other institutions. The funding would allow us to expand our operations nationally while maintaining our focus on women-led ventures. As the reception wound down, Michael approached me, maintaining the professional boundaries we had established since the divorce. "Congratulations on the expansion funding," he said. "Phoenix Capital has accomplished more in 1 year than most advisory firms achieve in 5. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment with the confident grace I'd developed since launching my own firm. "We've identified a significant market opportunity that traditional evaluation methods have consistently overlooked. You certainly have." He hesitated before adding, "The Porsche, by the way. Troy mentioned the buyer is bringing it to the Classic Car Show next month. Apparently it's become something of a legend in collector circles. The car that launched Phoenix Capital. They're calling it." I couldn't help but smile at this unexpected epilogue to our story. "Well, it was always a good investment, as you often said. Just not in the way either of us anticipated." Michael nodded, accepting the gentle irony. "For what it's worth, I'd make the same trade now. The car for what you've created? No contest." As he moved away to join the Pearson contingent, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. What had begun as an act of rebellion, selling Michael's prized Porsche after yet another canceled anniversary, had catalyzed a complete transformation of my professional identity, and, increasingly, the financial landscape itself. The Phoenix Fund, our newly established investment vehicle focused exclusively on women-led ventures, had already directed over $50 million to entrepreneurs who might otherwise have remained underfunded. These businesses were addressing market needs that traditional companies had ignored or underserved, creating both economic value and social impact. Olivia joined me as I prepared to leave the summit, her eyes sparkling with the satisfaction of our shared success. As both my closest friend and Phoenix Capital's chief marketing officer, she had witnessed every step of our extraordinary journey. 1 year, she marveled, from selling a car to changing an industry. Not bad for a month's work. The joke carried, the easy familiarity of our friendship and professional partnership. "The ultimate revenge success story," I replied with a smile. Though I'm not sure revenge is the right word anymore. Indeed, what had begun as an act of justified rebellion had evolved into something far more profound than simple vindication. Phoenix Capital had transformed not just my professional identity, but aspects of the financial industry itself, creating pathways for overlooked talent and undervalued innovation that benefited the entire ecosystem. As we left the summit venue, a sleek silver sports car pulled up at the valet station, not a vintage Porsche but the latest Tesla model. The driver, one of the entrepreneurs Phoenix Capital had successfully funded, waved enthusiastically in my direction. "That's Gracie Thompson," I explained to Olivia. "Her sustainable energy startup just closed a Series B round for $40 million. 3 major firms turned her down before Phoenix Capital recognized the potential." "From overlooked to oversubscribed," Olivia observed, "just like Phoenix Capital itself." Looking back across the year since that lonely anniversary dinner, I realized the most powerful lesson wasn't about Michael's failure to recognize my capabilities, or even Phoenix Capital's subsequent success. It was about the artificial limitations we often accept without questioning, whether limitations others place on us, or those we internalize through cultural conditioning. Selling Michael's Porsche hadn't just funded a business, it had shattered a perceptual framework that had constrained both his vision and my own expectations. The act itself, claiming the right to liquidate a prized possession to fund my ambitions, had represented a fundamental rejection of the subordinate role I had gradually accepted throughout our marriage. As our car pulled away from the summit venue, My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Congratulations again on all you've achieved this year. The anniversary dinner you missed created something far more significant than the one I missed. The symmetry of his observation struck me as we merged into the evening traffic. 1 year ago, I had sat alone at a meticulously prepared anniversary dinner, reading Michael's text about the Tokyo deal that wouldn't close itself. Today, hundreds of financial professionals had gathered to hear about the firm that dinner had inadvertently created, a firm that had helped close dozens of deals for entrepreneurs who might otherwise have remained unfunded. The ultimate irony, of course, was that Michael's Tokyo deal, the one that had been important enough to miss our anniversary, had actually failed. Meanwhile, the business his absence had inadvertently inspired was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations, including my own. As the city lights blurred past our windows, I smiled at the perfect poetry of it all. The car that Michael had valued above our anniversary had funded the company that was now valued at over $200 million. The financial acumen he had dismissed for years had saved his company from collapse. And the woman he had seen as just a wife had emerged as one of the industry's most innovative leaders. Sometimes the most valuable gifts are the opportunities we create for ourselves. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all, but becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. Whether that means selling a beloved car to fund a dream business, or building that business into something that transforms not just your own life, but an entire industry's understanding of value. As Phoenix Capital continued to grow, that would be my lasting legacy, not the story of a wife who sold her husband's car in a moment of justified anger, but of a financial innovator who recognized value where others saw only risk or insignificance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.